Okay, everyone. So I said I would make a little presentation for the Profections.
Hmm.
And my presentation, of course, is without slideshows and without any preparation. I'm just gonna open up the app here and then see what we can do. So, do you mind if I share my screen? Am I capable of doing so?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. All right. Mm,
What's that a picture of, huh?
Okay, so this is, hold on. I'm just gonna take off some of the, just to make it less messy. Okay. So this is my chart here. I'll show you a bit, like a few things with my chart in a little bit. So since we're doing perfections, this is basically a timing technique. It was developed Hellenistically, so ancient Greek tradition. It was a way to look at the progression of years where each house in the chart actually takes on a full year. So for example, if you're in a first year perfection, then you have a year lord, which would be Venus, right? Because Venus is the ruler of the first. And so the way that the perfections would work is when you're born at 0, you have your chart ruler, and then that's the active planet. So whatever that planet is doing natally, in transits, in secondary progressions, in solar arc directions, and any other timing technique is going to host a bit more importance for that year. And so I'm just going to take off all the bodies for a moment, just to make this a bit simpler to look at. And actually, because obviously they didn't have these complex calculations that we have today, they would use either like equal sign, whole house sign systems. This is generally the way that they worked with this. In my opinion, it's going to work no matter which way you do it, but it does make kind of sense. And I'm not really going to go into the framework and the philosophy behind which house system, but I'm just going to go ahead and move it into the whole house sign system or whole sign. Thank you. Okay. And you'll see that the only difference that really makes is that you start at 0 degrees in each house, and it simply shows you where the angular houses are actually placed. Um, and so the point of the perfections, of course, gives voice to the fact that um, each sign following the ascendant is going to host a full year, and therefore the planet that they're ruled by is going to host a full year. Now, when this technique was developed, we didn't have Uranus, we didn't have Neptune, we didn't have Pluto, none of the asteroids. So I think you can just as well use the modern rulers and it will work anyway because any level of interpretation has some truth to it. Obviously, there's 1 trillion things happening in a chart. So it doesn't fully matter in what way we do it, but I am going to use the traditional rulers just to explain how this works. And then you can decide for yourselves how you actually want to work with the technique. And so it's pretty simple. You know, you can all hold in your mind what age you're at right now, right? I'm 24, which means that I'm again at a first house perfection year. So you can just count on your finger. You know, you're born, you're 0, and that's the first house. 1, second house. 2, third house. 3, fourth house, and so on. And so it goes in multiples of 12. The interesting thing with this actually is um, when we talk about Jupiter returns, that they happen once about every 12 years, right? It is also the same amount of time that you perfect from first house back to first house. And that's when we complete a full cycle of the zodiac. And so it opens kind of a philosophical consideration of the significance of Jupiter, besides expansion, besides good luck, besides beneficence, besides amplification. You know, what is it about Jupiter that he's both ruler of Pisces as the 12th sign, and the fact that his apparent motion is also 12 years in order to complete a cycle around the zodiac. So for me, this says thing about Jupiter and his nature in general. The fact that his timing follows the timing of the perfected years and the full cycle around the zodiac that is 12. So that's something I won't cover here, obviously, because we want to get to the timing technique, but just something to think about the way that these things are interlinked. Okay. So typically, like you're going to see, so for example, if I'm in a first house perfection year, right, Venus is the ruler. And therefore, anything Venus is doing in transits, whatever Venus is doing natally in the chart is going to become very important. But if I'm in a fourth house perfection year, in that case, the sun is going to be really important. Or if I'm in Scorpio, then it's going to be Mars, right? And so the planet that rules over the house in question is called the Lord of the year. And that just means that, for example, if you're in a Mars year, this is going to signify typical Mars things, right? It's going to be more action oriented. There's going to be a lot of changes. There's going to be ambitions unfolding. You're going to be more driven. And it is going to depend on the position of Mars. And so I want to show a little bit of that as well. Before I get into that, so you have the ruler of the year, but then there's also Lord of the month. So, for example, if you start here in a first house perfection year, the first month is going to be ruled by Venus. The second month is going to be ruled by Gemini, so Mercury. The third month by Cancer, so the moon. And this kind of gives themes for each month of the year that add on to the story of what is happening with the Lord of the year, right? So you can imagine for the first month, and the sixth month, where Venus rules both, is going to be very important moments in the life because Venus has a double theme, ruler of the year and ruler of the month. Okay. And then you have ruler of the day, if you want to take it that far. So here I have my birthday on August 1st. So on August 1st, I start here. August 2nd is a second house day. August 3rd is a third house day. August 4th is a fourth house day, and so on and so forth. And you can see actually it's pretty simple. I mean, the intuition behind it, it doesn't, it's very clear. It's kind of very obvious how these things go. And and you can even take it as far as Lord of the hour, but we're not going to go there. You don't even really have to go to Lord of the day, right? Lord of the month and Lord of the year kind of enough. Even Lord of the year can just give us kind of a big clue about what we can expect. Now, the interesting thing is that, and I won't go there just for sake of brevity, but when you're doing your perfections, let's say you're in a second house year and you have the ruler as the sun, okay? So if you go into solar arc directions or secondary progressions, in that case, the sun is going to be in the same position. Whatever is happening with the sun is going to be like really spotlit. So, for example, if he goes into exactitude in secondary progressions, let's say with a square to Saturn, for example, that is going to be very highly significant because it's highlighted not only in secondary progressions, but also in perfections, meaning that there's something very important for you to gain here, right? And the sun can signify many things, Saturn can signify many things, the square can signify many things. It's all going to depend mostly on their relationship in your natal chart itself. So, whenever we're doing any of the timing techniques and especially perfections, it's really important to understand what this planet's role is in the natal chart itself. Now, the other thing is that when you're in a perfection year, and you start to work with the Lord of the Year, it's an amazing time to study first how houses work in your life, and second, how this specific planetary energy represents itself. What kind of people are coming into your life? What kind of people are leaving your life? Where are you traveling to? What are you learning about? So it's going to host a lot of information for you to learn about your own chart. And you kind of have 12 opportunities in 12 years to learn about all these different planets. And something similar is like, if, for example, if you have Venus as ruler of the year and she makes a contact with the north or south node, you can guarantee that is going to be a very, very significant moment in your life. right? Because there's this corroboration. Anything that touches the North Node is going to be kind of like meeting with destiny, showing the nature, chiseling out that planetary energy, meeting the maker of what that planet is supposed to represent in the chart. And then the fact that they rolled a year is going to make that year kind of be signified by that event. Okay, and this can happen in many ways. For example, if you have Venus square Saturn natally, and then you're in a Venus profection year, when you look at the transits and Venus makes a square to Saturn in the sky, you will understand very well what that aspect means in your chart. Right. So the thing that is really important for me with profections is the fact that they tell us a lot more about how these planets work in our life. And besides, they kind of give us another way to perceive about how each year is passing and what each house also is signifying in our life. Okay, so I'm going to pause here before I go into some examples. Is it pretty clear? Or are there questions?
Oh, good. As far as I understand.
I have one question. Of course, I have a question. Sorry. You happen to have August 1st, the first of the month. So, when you're doing the perfection for a year, if the birthday is not on the first of the year, how would that do you bring it? Does everybody start with the one?
So
If
if you,
your
but when's
birthday
your
is, let's say
birthday?
your birthday is mine March 25th. Would I go back to one for
No,
the
you would start at March 25th.
and you keep going forward?
And you keep, so it's March 25th, and then it's April 20, and then May
Okay,
25th.
okay, thanks. That's the question.
Mhm.
Thanks. I'll mute myself.
Thanks, Lauren. Okay. So sounds like we're pretty good on questions for now. All right, great. Okay, so I'll just give you guys a few examples. I didn't prepare for this, so I actually don't even know if they're going to work. But I'll just show a few significant dates that happened in my life. And then this is going to be kind of fun because we're going to test whether this is actually functioning the way it's supposed to anyway. So I didn't check on this stuff. Like, and also when this stuff was happening, I didn't have any interest in astrology. So I'm mainly just going to cover, like, what's really interesting about this group is we have people at all different ages, right? So someone like me has very little life experience. So when I talk to you about the past 2 years of my life, they're full of things, and I can just talk about those perfection years. Whereas if somebody like Lauren is speaking, Lauren, you have a few decades behind you. So you can go into different points where the perfection year was the same. So, for example, repeating fourth house year. And then you can kind of discuss how you saw the different ways of that thing manifesting itself. I'm
Um,
not putting you on the spot. You don't have to do that, but
Mary, do you mind if I ask a quick question?
go
Uh,
ahead.
So you mentioned about the North Node being destiny point, which is fantastic. So let's say you had your Venus natally in the fourth house, and then the let's say your North Node in the seventh house, and then the trend, and you was in a fourth house year perfection, where Venus also happened to be ruler, and then Venus in transit was over the North Node in the seventh. Would it be signifying that the seventh house is the most significant energy, or is it a little bit of both, like seventh and the fourth house energies will come into play?
Oh my God, thank you. Okay. I thought I was missing something. So let me just show you something else. I think it's going to answer your question. If it doesn't, you can ask me again.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go ahead and just put all the stuff on here. Yeah, thank you. Just thank you, because this is really important, and I just can't believe I didn't even go over it. Okay. Um, so look, I'm in a first house perfection year, right? I'm 24. So I've completed 2 cycles of the zodiac. I'm back to the first house. Now, Venus is in the second house, right? So when I'm in a first house year, the second house is also going to become very important because Venus is actually placed there. There's something even more interesting, however, is that if I'm in a first house year, right, and it's ruled by Venus, I want to see how many houses away from the first Venus is placed. So in this case, it's obviously one house away. So this is a double theme. It's like, not only do I have a first house year, which is kind of the main, like, my self-expression, my spirit, my identity, who am I, how do I present myself in the world, but now it's also about my attachments, right? My needs, my resources, my finances, my money. And that's doubly so, because not only is Venus in the second, but Venus is also in the second from the ruler, the house ruling the year. But let me give you another example to make this more clear. For example, if I was in a sixth house year, Venus is also ruler, right? Venus is in Gemini, so we know that Venus is 9 houses away from the sixth. In that case, if I'm in a sixth house profection year, I'm also in a way bringing in a lot of 9 house themes, because Venus is 9 away from the house she's ruling. So when Venus is making transits into the second or into the ninth or into the sixth, you're going to see kind of like a spotlight happening on this energy, and she's going to really become important. In this case, because Venus also hosts the north node in my chart, whenever they make contact is going to be highly, highly significant, because the north node is expressing that it belongs to Venus in some way. And so they have a very special contact. And when they make that contact, so for example, if you had the North Node in Scorpio, okay, and you had Mars transiting the North Node, you better pay attention to what's happening, because that is going to give you a lot of information about what you're here to do, right? So, does that answer your question, Kay?
I mean, just as an interest though, because you mentioned Mars transiting North Node into seventh house.
Mm-hmm.
So would that be in? I mean, there's a lot of information here to do, but is that in specific to seventh house energies as well? As in, like, it will reveal to you maybe what type of person you're meant to meet, or a kind of like a karmic kind of relationship with the seventh house, or is it more of a spotlight on where Mars actually is placed in the natal chart, or is it a combination of both?
It's a combination of both, because astrology is an art of synthesis. And
Mm.
so your interpretation is, but okay, so to answer your question a bit more concisely, if, for example, you have Scorpio on the 7th, as I do, um, and you have Mars in the 3rd, right? And then you look at the aspects to Mars. So he has a square from Saturn, he has an opposition to Jupiter, he has a trine to Moon, right? These things are really going to color the expression of Mars, and therefore the way the partnership is expressed in general. And so if I had the North Node here in the 7th and Mars was crossing that North Node, it would basically activate this latent energy very strongly, and he would start to explain about his contacts with Saturn, with the North Node, with the Moon, with Jupiter. So there's not a very simple way to.
Oh, I see. So it just activates the planet. It's basically like going, it gives it a little bit of a boost and a spotlight going. If it was murky before, it's not going to be murky now. But this
Mhm,
period that it's transiting, it's going to be really powerful and showing you what it's about effectively.
exactly. And something else I want to point your attention to is that astrology, there's always many factors corroborating the same event. So if you're in a Mars perfection year, if you look at your secondary progressions, I guarantee you Mars is going to be doing something interesting.
Mm.
you know and he's going to make contacts, of course, within the full year that you have natally. And so when he's making those contacts, whether that's to your natal chart or in transit to other planets, those are going to be days, moments where that energy is going to be very active.
Mm. Thank you.
Sure. Okay.
Yeah, I had a question. And so if the ruler of my first house it's in Aquarius, and so the ruler is Saturn or Uranus, usually you take the Saturn or the Uranus, like what you have noticed. And if their transits are really, really slow, then I don't know. I guess they wouldn't be making as many transits during the year, right? What
Hmm.
would you look at? Oh, I have a bad time.
So for example, if you have, right, so you said you have Saturn rules your first house, right?
Yeah, it's in Aquarius, uh-huh.
And what do you have as your ascendant?
My ascendant is in Aquarius. That's why Saturn rules it, and Uranus rules it as well.
Uh-huh. Okay, and you have Saturn placed in the first, is what you're saying.
No. The transiting Saturn is in the 12th, and my actual Saturn is in the 6th, the natal one. In the 8th, my natal one.
Got it. Okay, so because in general, planets like Saturn, Jupiter, all the slow bodies, they don't make aspects to other planets as much as planets make aspects to them.
Mm-hmm.
And so in this case, it's going to be interesting. For example, whenever the moon is making a major aspect to Saturn, because she moves pretty quickly, that's going to be kind of like, it's going to be, but every day is interesting. Every day has something happening. But in those moments, for example, if you have natally moon opposite Saturn, every time in transit, she
Mm-hmm.
makes an opposition either to your natal moon, or sorry, to your natal Saturn, or to
Mm-hmm.
transiting Saturn. You're going to feel that energy strongly in yourself. And so those are just days to pay attention to, per the Profection technique. Did that answer your question, or was that not addressing what you wanted to ask?
No, that answers it partly. And so I would look for at Uranus and at Saturn at the same time, right? Because there are two rulers. All right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah. Thanks.
Very welcome. Thanks for your question. Okay. Does anyone else have questions, or should I go on?
Go on.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, so I'll just present a couple of events that happened in my own life. Here's what I can say, and it's kind of interesting. So 2 years ago, when I was in an 11th house year, right, that's when I had just graduated university and I had started working. So let's just so 11th house Pisces, right? I don't use Neptune, I use Jupiter. Either way, it doesn't matter because they're both in the 9th house of Capricorn. So in this case, it makes it a little bit easier. But you can see when I was in the 11th house profection year and Pisces was the ruler, you can imagine Pisces is going to be a major theme of my life as well as 11th house. 11th house is what? Very simply, I'm just going to keep it broad here. Hopes and dreams, friendships, different social groups, interactions with social infrastructure, dealing with institutional realities, things like this, right? This is 11th house stuff. And so you also want to look at what is Jupiter doing natally. So we know that Jupiter is in the 9th. So that's actually 11 houses from the 11th, if we talk about derived houses. So if he's in the 11th of the 11th, you can see that this is a pretty major 11th house themed year as a whole. And I'm not going to pull up the transits yet because I'm going to do it once I'm in the 12th house year. This is just to kind of set up context. So I'll do first very wide, and then I'll narrow it down so that we see different levels at which this applies. And I hope that's helpful. So when we started the 11th, right, he's in the 11th of the 11th, you can see that I'm actually going to have a pretty major friendship, social group themed year. And in general, every time I have an 11th house perfection year, that's going to be the case because Jupiter natally and Neptune natally are always in the 9th house. However, because they're in the 9th, it's going to be 11th and 9th combined. So maybe it's like changing my philosophies about the world through my friends, going on amazing adventures and trips in order to meet my hopes and dreams, dealing with institutional structural realities. And so I have to search for truth because what does it mean to be in this social world? Blah, 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 So you kind of combine these two themes together a little bit. And then I can tell you what was happening when I was in this perfection year. I was 22. I had just graduated university. I started working at a software company. I was in sales. I was beating all the top records. I was making so much money, I didn't know what to do with it. I was hanging out with all of my friends, so many friends, 6 different friend groups. I was doing yoga. I was going to networking events with the rich people in my city. I was doing online groups, so much work with friends. You can't even believe. And during this time, I was also editing a lot of my personal beliefs about reality, right? Because as soon as work was over, I would go and I would bike over to a friend's house, and we would talk about, I don't know, existentialism or philosophy. You know, this is a popular thing that young people like to do nowadays. And then we would go together for ski trips in Colorado over the weekend, or we go to New York City, or we go to LA, and we would just do things around, just like have fun. And it was a lot of travels, you know. I did a lot of traveling in that year. It was all around the United States because I was living in the US at the time. But you can see, you know, 11th house, friends all the time, every day. There just wasn't a moment I was alone. I was constantly inundated with people. If I wasn't working, I was either at yoga, or I was at the networking group, or I was in a different group, or, you know, I was really doing 1,000 things. I was very, very, very socially active. And I had to deal with things like taxes, you know, with like payments, and with like HR. I was constantly getting in trouble at work because I wasn't following HR's rules and things like that. You know, this stuff is all 11th house, you know, social contracts, friendships, groups, developments within social socially intertwined mixtures of people. And then ninth house, you know, travels, beliefs, philosophy, spirituality, religion. At this moment as well, I was being ridiculed a lot at work because I was having very spiritual approaches to everything I was doing. People thought I was goofy. I mean, they kind of liked it. They would poke fun at me. But it was kind of like at this period I was formulating this thing that would prepare me for the 12th house year, which is very interesting what happened. And I was just kind of like, I don't really belong in the US. None of this stuff makes sense to me. I have all these crazy out there beliefs, and people here just want to make money. They're just trying to do all this stuff. I feel like a number. I have all my friends, but I don't feel fulfilled, right? And so the 11th house is kind of a existential crisis kind of year, because when you have so much interaction with other people, and you get to exchange so much information with different groups, with different societies, with different groups of friends, whatever, right? At one point maybe you get tired, and you need some isolation. You need to withdraw, and you need to go within, and you need to kind of go into your mind and integrate everything that's been happening, and visit those unconscious parts where you're not really able to share with your friends anymore at some level, because there's always a level of butting heads, right? And so I progressed into my 12th house year. I'm just going to go ahead and do my birthday. I celebrated my birthday in Russia, but it doesn't matter. Okay, so what happened in the 12th house year? So after I had all this stuff with work, I got really tired. I couldn't do it anymore. They were training me for a promotion where I was going to make literally just insurmountable amounts of money. And that's the point where I recognize, like, actually I did not come to live for money. Like, I just can't do it. It's not my truth. It's not the adventure I came here to have. It's not my philosophy. It's not the way I want to approach my life. And so you can see how that stuff all happens in the kind of 11th, ninth, you know, perfection, kind of like this combination of the two. So then enter the 12th. The 12th is ruled by Mars, right? And so in this case, I have Mars natally in the third. And so that's going to be 4 houses from the 12th. So besides everything that's signified by the 12th, which is, you know, isolation, diving into my unconscious, thinking about the dream world, going to different dimensional layers, all the stuff that's kind of like hidden from view, right? That's also going to include something about home. You know,
Mhm.
what is home? Where is home? Just remember, Mars is not in the 4th house. It's not a 4th house year, but Mars is 4 houses from the one that's ruling over the year. Okay? I hope that makes sense. I hope that's very clear here. And in another interesting thing here is that, you know, Saturn is here uh, together with the South Node. And you can see right away that actually what was happening at the time of my solar return is that Saturn in the transiting, so in the sky, was with the South Node as well. Okay. So that's very interesting because immediately, and you can even see they were 2 degrees apart, just as they are natally here. So something here is going to get very triggered. There's a part of this where it's like, it's just like it's like a past life memory almost. It's like I have to do something, right? You get activated. There's almost no choice. And I almost had no choice. I gave all my things away. I paid off all my debt. I saved up some money and I just went traveling. But I didn't really go traveling like going from place to place to place. What I actually did is I went to live in the mountains in Italy, like off grid, like farming basically. And you can see right away this isolation piece that comes in. And by the way, I did not prepare for this presentation, so I hope that everything is going to work. um, and also at this time, which was last year, beginning of last year, like end of 20, like middle end of 2019, I was not into astrology. I didn't know anything about astrology. This is a topic that wasn't really introduced in my life in any meaningful way. And so, and it's almost kind of weird. And so I was in isolation here, really, like living very far away from society. I wasn't seeing anyone. There was a point where I even stopped looking at the mirror because there was nobody to impress. There was like nothing, there was no need to see my own appearance because I was so deep in my soul, like digging in whatever is happening here. And I'm gonna go ahead and just jump to the dates that I want to talk about that are the most significant. So the first one is September 27th, 2019. We can leave it at that. I'll go ahead and edit this place. Okay. So I was in this place called Ceres. Ceres, actually, like the asteroid. So it's actually interesting to see even where is the asteroid. I didn't plan any of this. I was just taken there randomly, okay? Oh, look, she's with Jupiter, crazy. And natally, she's with Pluto. Okay, so that just makes me ask some question. I don't even really know the significance of Ceres because I don't really work with the asteroids at all. Maybe you guys can add to that at some point. But it's just interesting, that I went to this place called Ceres. Interestingly enough, the person I was living with had a tattoo that looked like the glyph of Ceres. He had no idea about astrology. That was crazy for me. So what happened on this date? September 27th is when I had my first spiritual awakening. I was in ayahuasca ceremony. I don't know if you guys know what that is. It's a kind of very intense, psychedelic, ritualistic, ceremonial thing where I kind of remembered astrology, and then I had other things, let's say, happening. And you can see again, so there's just a couple things I want to point out here. Let's see what Mars is doing. Okay, so Mars is at Virgo 25. You can see that he's actually approaching the opposition where he's about to enter Libra, where he's opposite to the house where he's ruling. He's in the 5th house of passion and creativity. Okay, more interestingly, I want to point out natally the 12th house hosts Saturn and South Node here, right? So we can see that in the sky, Saturn and South Node were together at this time. And they were in the 9th house, okay, of spirituality, of religion, of awakening, of adventure, of seeking, of truth, blah, 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 blah. And that's exactly, literally what happened to me. I had past life remembrance. I totally awakened to the fact that I don't have this identity. This is not me. This is not who I am. And I became the universe, And so it was, and that told me a lot about what this signifies, this South Node and Saturn combination in the 12th house. This kind of like, if you talk about traditional astrology, something that they might tell you is that you were a teacher in a past life and you were some kind of spiritual leader or guru, right? Because this is happening in Aries, the leader, it's happening in the 12th house of spirituality, and it's happening with the South Node of past lives, and it's Saturn, the teacher, right? And so you take all these pieces together, and then you just divine that this somehow makes me a past life spiritual leader, whatever, whatever, whatever. I can see it somehow in the way that I present myself now, but at the same time, what is a past life? Is that really true? Is it real? How is it really going to actually manifest? Blah blah blah. Just some philosophical considerations about what do we believe about these symbols and why do they signify these things. Okay. Then about a month later, was a bit less than a month, but no, 2 months later. Let's say like a month and 2 weeks. There's this guy I met online. His name is Kirk. He's an astrologer. We fell in love online instantly. I started sending him a lot of money, and he was kind of like somebody that I felt we had a very strong, significant connection. So here I see the south node is approaching my Jupiter, right? And they're pretty much exact. They had just passed each other. And here I can see that the nodes besides are actually squaring themselves, right? And again, you want to look at what Mars is doing. So Mars in this case was in Libra, 26 degrees. So he was making a trine here to the moon, and he was making a trine here to Venus, who hosts the nodes. And besides, he was about to go into the 7th house of partnership, right? So he was just 4 degrees away from that. Remember, we're using whole signs. So if he was going to go on the descendant, that would be at 23 degrees. And the sun was actually just about there at 23 degrees of Scorpio. And I'm just trying to display that this is really a question of synthesis, a lot of synthesis. The other thing you can notice is that the north node is going back towards Mars, right? So I want to look at what Mars is doing natally. And you can see the north node is approaching Mars. So they're about conjunct. And so you can see that in this case, this year is not only about Mars and 4th house, but it's also about north node dealing with Mars. And that's very significant, very, very, very significant. And the interesting thing I'm going to tell you is that this guy, Kirk, that I met here on this day online, and I actually didn't look at what's happening in the sky tonight, but I'm meeting him tonight in person for the first time because he lives here in New York, where I am. So it's like there's like a kind of a completion of a cycle. Anyway, and so besides the fact that Mars is here in the 3rd, so 4 houses from the 12th, not only was I in isolation, but I was having a lot of questions about home. Like, what is home? What does it mean to be home? I don't have a home. I don't feel anywhere that I'm at home. I never felt like I was at home. I felt abandoned. I didn't really have a family. I didn't understand this concept of home. And a big part of my search for truth, right, this Mars opposite Jupiter here, 3rd and the 9th, it has a lot to do with where do I belong? And you can see how that's a 12th and 4th house theme together. And there's a third house theme to it as well. How do I communicate myself? In what way have I chosen to do so? Okay, so I'm going to move on. I hope this isn't too fast. I can go really deep into these, but it's not even that interesting. Okay, 3 months later in February, I was living in India, in Varanasi, the city of death, where they burn dead bodies the whole day, throughout the whole day, on the river, whatever. There's dead bodies floating in the river. There's cow shit and monkey shit and everything everywhere. I met the second most significant person in my life. Okay, her name is Louisa. Somebody else I fell in love with immediately. Her and I had a 4-day, unbelievable, cosmic, angelic romance, just something ludicrous. So what was Mars doing? Again, because he's ruler of the year, right? We want to see what's happening with him. Here he is about to enter the 9th house of Capricorn. Well, that's interesting because her and I had a very spiritual connection. But again, look, he's about to approach the south node. And interestingly, he's directly opposite Venus. And what is Venus doing in that case? Well, Venus is on top of the south node with Saturn. And so you can see that there's these several themes that are happening again at the same time. The north node is getting closer to Mars here. It's interesting, you know? The ascendant, well, no, it doesn't matter because the ascendant moves too quickly. But the Uranus was basically almost exactly square Uranus that's on the midheaven, right? And Louisa really changed the way that I see the whole of reality, because up until then I had thought I was gay all my life. And then I noticed, no, you actually have the capacity to love a woman. How interesting. And so that was like really crazy for me, you know, some kind of very strange happening that is almost unbelievable. Saturn was on top of Neptune. You know, you kind of see the way these transit and these things start to play, because remember, Saturn is in the 12th with the south node. Whatever Saturn is doing is also going to be really important. And Louisa is this kind of very godly creature. She's completely devoted to God. And so I met this very Saturnian, Neptunian kind of person that is completely and totally surrendered to God. And she kind of awakened me to my own capacity for infinite love, whatever that means.
You know me asking though, because you
Yeah.
mentioned that like because Uranus, you're in a sudden change, so you suddenly awaken to the fact that you can love a woman. But is that a lasting thing? Have you ever, if you don't mind me asking, found that you're attracted to love to another woman again? Because Neptune is also the great deceiver, illusion, fantasy. So, I'm just wondering if it was like, wow, that happened. That was really interesting. Didn't believe that. And then now it's like, nah, I'm not really interested anymore.
So good. Thank you. No, I don't have interest in anyone other than Louisa. But I do have a very deep and sincere love for her. And you'll see something else interesting happen with her, and I'll get there in just a moment. It's crazy how these things work, because you can just see the way that these themes keep repeating. And so it's very important to pay attention in these perfection years, like what is happening with these energies? What are they touching? How are they interacting with the things that they're natally interacting? Because it starts to give you, because now if I look back at it, I can see that this thing that happened with Louisa is the most significant event in my life, besides this thing that happened with Kirk, besides the thing that happened with the ayahuasca ceremony. Okay, so I'll go to the next event. This was in July, let's say about the 20th. I was back in Italy. I went back on this mountain. There's many things that happened in between. I had a Vipassana. It would be interesting to check but it's fine. The whole theme of the 12th house is that I was in isolation. I was traveling and I was going to many different places, but I was really exploring my soul, the depths of my being. It was just me. Whereas the previous year was so many friends, so much contact, so many groups, so much interaction. It was like I did not have a moment to myself. In this year, that was the 12th house year, I was just alone, straight up alone. I was meeting people, I was interacting with people, but it was a very personal, internal, intricately soulful kind of experience. It didn't have much to do with anyone else, even if other people were a big portion of my awakening. Okay. And again, the things like ayahuasca, doing these crazy psychedelic ceremonies, being in these tribal societies, doing these crazy, this is very much 12th house. The taboo, the forbidden, the deceived, the illusory, the strange, the out there. And you can see July 20th is about the time where I'm ending this perfection year. Okay, just before I arrive to this first house perfection year. And in this moment, on July 20th, Mars was in his home in the 12th on top of the South Node. But in this case, this is, it's kind of interesting because you can see that it's approaching very close to Venus, right? So Venus is starting to kind of play more of an important role because she is about to be perfected into Lord of the Year. So you want to start, once there's like these last month or two, you can start to look at the next planet as well, because they're going to start playing a role. They're kind of like handing the reins off to each other. So you can see that the North Node, Mars was on the South Node, the North Node was going on top of Venus. Okay, and Venus herself was approaching her return, while the North Node was about to touch Venus. And the North Node, remember, is held by Venus, like in general. And the South Node is held by Mars in general, right? So these things, we really want to pay attention to also, what does the Lord of the Year, besides the house that he's ruling or she's ruling over, what other planets are they ruling over? Because those planets are also going to play somehow an important role, okay? And so this is when I met Alex. Alex is someone that arrived to our Airbnb in the mountain. Alex is by far the most significant person that I ever encountered, even beyond Louisa. He's the straight guy, but we immediately, it's crazy what happened between us. There was just this instant, like, this connection, like we're together, like we have never been apart. And 1 week or 2 weeks later, on my solar return, which I spent actually in here on the mountain, I had my vision quest, which is when you go, there's like a week of preparation, and then you go on a mountain alone, like without anybody else, with your prayers, and you don't drink and don't eat, and you just sleep in this one area on the mountain by yourself for 4 days. And you can see that that's kind of the perfect wrapping to the end of the zodiac. I was having a vision quest, you go through the zodiac twice. And on my solar return, when I was handing off the reins to Venus, I was having this vision quest, right? And I did have visions about who I am and what I'm supposed to do on this planet. Very significant visions. And by the way, a lot of my life theme has to do with food because I was obese all of my life until about 2 or 3 years ago. And so it's just interesting that during the vision quest, I also had memories of literally every single food I had ever eaten at every restaurant with every person. Like all these memories just started coming up when I'm perfecting into a Taurus year. Taurus is a lot about food, right? Fixed earth, nourishment, nutrition, earth. Okay. And that was the last thing I really did in isolation. Because after I had that vision quest, I was like, I need to go into the world and express myself. Like, I'm ready to be me. I'm ready to do what I want to do. And that's about the time I started working very sincerely with astrology, right? So in the first house. You can see I'm having my Venus return here. The North Node is making very close contact. And now I'm going to go to the kind of the second to last date that's very important. That's September 15th. I wonder what happened on September 15th. Would you believe it? Venus is ruler of the year. North Node is exact conjunct Venus. Okay? And we're talking about not only the first house of me, but also the second house of possessions. But besides possessions, there's something a bit deeper about the second house, which is like attachments. Like, what are you attached to in this world? Because your attachments are actually what keep you bound. They're kind of what keep you grounded in this reality. Hence why Taurus is natural ruler of the second. Okay, that's a whole nother story. So I was in a year of identity, me, and as well in a month, right? Because September is the second month of attachments. So Mercury becomes important as well. What is he doing in my natal chart? But also, look, he's here on top of the North Node. You know, you just can't make this shit up. And so what happened here is Alex and I left Italy together to go to Belgium because he wanted to do some kind of healing modalities in Belgium, whatever. I had a bunch of other friends I wanted to invite. I booked an Airbnb for all of us. And then I invited Louisa as well. Okay. And somehow I knew this would happen, but I knew I had to do it. And this was the day that Alex and I arrived to Belgium on the 15th. Okay. So I'm just going to fast forward 2 days. This is the day when Louisa and Alex met, right? Because I invited Louisa, my lover from India, and I was with Alex, my lover from Italy, and the two of them fell in love. And not only did they fall in love, but they made love in front of me, okay? And it was in that moment where I watched them, I just sat with my hand on my heart, literally dying to myself because I couldn't believe this was happening to me, that I released my need to possess other people because I understood that there's nothing you can do to stop love. It just happens. And I am simply an avatar, like somebody that is connecting these different pieces together. And from that point on, I just stopped believing in monogamy because I saw that it's just not possible. It's like people love each other with different boundaries in different ways, in different moments in time, and then they move on and then they reconnect and then they do all these things, blah, blah, blah. And so it's interesting because natally, right, Venus and Mars are conjunct loosely. Mars has these squares here. Mars was approaching the end to his time here, but he was making a trine to Mercury, who was Lord of the month, who was also here on top of the North Node. North Node was with Venus, who was ruler of the year. So I'm trying to keep it simple, but it's really not, but it also is. And South Node was here opposite Venus, you know, so whatever is happening here with Saturn is going to be really important. And this was really about releasing attachments to human beings. And yeah, and so you see how these lords, they're really, and you know, Mercury in Libra, in this case in the 6th, you're really learning how to be in service to other people without really to harmonize in your day-to-day life, like to allow things to happen in a peaceful way, right? Because Mercury's ruler of the month, and he's over here in Libra, partnership, right? So this is a lot of communications about partnership, about who is with who and under what circumstance and how do relationships really happen.
It's
And
really interesting because you got the 8th and the 2nd. So
huh?
it's really interesting because you got the 8th and the 2nd with the North nodes. North and South Node. 8 is about vulnerability, intimacy, secrets. And the second house is not just about attachments. You could also say it's about self-worth, self-value, and then Venus, love, affection, intimacy. So again, it's a question of reevaluating, allowing yourself to be vulnerable and to expose yourself to that kind of scenario. It takes a lot of you have to allow yourself to be vulnerable, to place yourself in a situation where you might get hurt. And then I guess the 6th house as well, like you say, is service, traditionally Virgo, I suppose, so innocence, so returning to that core element without the trappings of everything else.
You're amazing. Thank you. I don't know what to say. That's a thank you. Yeah. And so you see that all of our interpretations, like somehow you can see the way that these energies, it's almost like there's no control that I can even exert over life. I couldn't make this shit up, you know? It's literally this was happening while Venus was ruler of the year. And it was the most central thing to ever happen to me in my life, was that one moment.
You said you got into astrology. Was it this year or last year when you were in the 12th of the first house perfection? Which was it?
When I was in a 12th house perfection.
See, that's the same with me. I'm in a first house perfected year. Last year was my 12th house, and that's when I got into astrology. And I noticed that you're a Uranian, because your Uranus is like conjunct your midheaven. My Uranus is conjunct my ascendant. So I really recognize people who have Uranian energy. As soon as I saw you, I was like, Uranian. Yeah, very interesting.
That's very obvious. That's very obvious.
And yeah, so I can hand over the reins. You know, that kind of brings us to today. I'm kind of like staying with my mom in Arizona now. You know, I'm seeing Kirk tonight, who I met, you know, this time ago. That was really the first lover I had. And I don't really know, you know, where I would even see that. Venus is still ruler of the year. Oh, she's directly on my descendant. You know, you really can't make this stuff up. There's literally no organization in any part of my life. The sun is with the South Node. What? And I met Kirk when the nodes were squaring each other and Saturn was with the South Node. You know, it's like these things that you almost just, when you look at these perfections, it's just uncanny. It's creepy. It's like, no, I don't need to do or try or seek or attempt anything. It's just gonna fucking happen.
Do you work with Juno at all? Juno or the vertex?
No, I don't.
Because Juno is the meant to be your soulmate.
Well, here you go. Juno's right there, so. Well, in the transiting sky anyway, where's Juno natally? Well, here she is with Mars, who rules over Scorpio, where Venus is right now as ruler of the year, right? So, and you see they're both making some kind of contact with Juno. And so it's creepy, you guys, it's creepy. The perfections are creepy. And if you like really start to dig around and you go like in famous people's lives and you check with their autobiography, you just start to lose a sense of linearity or like any sense of control, that there's any kind of participation that we even have. The planets are just toying with us. It's amazing. I love it.
No, it's interesting. It's what I think it was if you read the Hermetica, I think Hermes, the Egyptian Hermes, wrote all those years back in ancient Egypt, was like, you know, until you reach awakening, when you connect back to Atman, you really are just dancing under the stars of the zodiac.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, better learn astrology.
But you know, my question for you in this is, even if you have an awakening, it's kind of like, to me, at least in my current conceptual comprehension, you go on playing out the role that the stars have you play out. It's just that you no longer have this kind of like resistance. It's more like, like it's beautiful. It's just, you're thriving in the harmony, in bliss.
It's an understanding, because like, let's say you go through hard times, right? And there's that praying like, nothing, this too shall pass. And I think that's to do with astrology. Like, you may have a very slow moving, very powerful planet, the outside of the transpersonal ones, affecting you, but it will pass. And being able to read that and seeing, even in terms of like kind of medicinal astrology, you can see what afflictions might be affecting you at certain times when you might be more vulnerable and stuff. And then when you might have the best window for surgery, for example. So I guess it's about analyzing the chart and going, right, let's see the hand that you're dealt and do the best with the hand that you got on the table effectively. I think it's very, very, very useful. I keep saying to all my friends, it's the map. Like,
Mm-hmm.
you just got to read the map. And I guess that's where your Scorpio would come in handy in the Aquarius energy, because it's like you're able to detach and just like analyze and see patterns, I suppose. But it's very interesting.
What is your name?
Kate.
Kate? Kate, are you writing on astrology?
No, I'm just doing my final exam on Sunday. So
In astrology?
yeah, so I did a foundational course. And then I did a first exam, got through that, and I got my final exam. But I really am very, very interested in astrology. I love it. I'm revising at the moment for my exam on Sunday, and I thought, what better way to prepare than come to today?
I'll be very interested to see your profections and what's happening with your Lord of the Year, Lord of the Month, and your exam.
Oh yeah, so I'm a first house year. I'm a Sagittarius rising with Uranus conjunct the ascendant. Jupiter is in the second. Along with Neptune in Capricorn.
Uh-huh. So it's kind of like this. So you must be you're born around the same time as I am.
No, I'm a lot older than you. I'm in May 22nd, 1984.
Oh, okay, so you're 36. Got it.
Mm.
Okay, so if you guys have questions, happy to answer them here, or else one of you can take the reins and talk about your perfection, so we can just kind of get deeper into this mystery. Maybe some of you have other examples or things. So go ahead.
Emma, thank you so much. So many things came up from this. I don't even know where to start. But I would suggest a quick break if you guys want before we move on, because I wanted to share something with you as well. And then Dwayne has a presentation. We can in between.
I went through all my years also of since I looked it up, so I can look at this is the 8th year. The 8th house, and then I looked at 7, 19, 31, 43, 55, and remembered all the events, not all, but the significant relatives. So I'd love to share that.
Okay, so very quick break then, so we have time for everything. See you in a minute. Are we all back? Do you want to start again? It's 44 now. Okay, so Emma, thank you so much one more time. It was very interesting because you literally taught me about how this technique works in general. Like, what's the rule? I didn't know about it before until a couple of weeks back. And when I first learned about it, I noticed that it's stressing the houses in the birth chart. So each year corresponding to a house. So I was very happy with that in the first moment, because you know how I concentrate on houses very much. I think they're very important as areas of when we think about events and happenings in life and what we can expect in certain times. I think more about circumstantial things like the houses in the chart, not that much about the zodiac, even though the zodiac triggers different things in different moments depending on the energy. But then I realized this house stressing is to do with the whole house system, because every year we are basically juxtaposing the zodiac with the houses. So the whole of the first house is one sign only. The whole of the second house is one sign only. And I don't use whole sign system for several reasons, for which I will tell you how I modified a little bit the Profections technique to suit what I think is a little bit more of a more modern approach, more psychological approach to what we're doing. And why? Because Profections is very interesting. It obviously works, but it's an ancient technique. It's a technique which was developed when astrology was at a different stage, and it was used for different purposes. It wasn't that personal, basically. It wasn't that psychological. It was more to do with really events were important because they were more social. in a more social context. It was more to do with countries and with processes that affect everybody equally in the same way, than with the process of individuation, or how we can work with our chart in a more conscious way, in a more individual way, which allows us to not be subject to fate completely. We can see that energies really work, and you demonstrated it, Emma, very well, how they actually work. We want it or not, we are under the influence of those algorithms and those cycles that overlap from all sorts of different places. But at the same time, let's consider for a moment how and in what way we can intervene into this process with our free will and with our conscious understanding of our chart as a, not just simply as a map, but also as a guideline through a journey, through a process. So thinking about lifetime as a process and seeing that this technique is dividing things by 12. So we are looking at the 12 signs and the 12 houses, whatever of the two you wish to pick. Then Jupiter is relevant, yes, but also I was thinking another planet is very relevant, and that's Uranus. Uranus cycle that nowadays is used or is supposed to be, it's more relevant to a normal standard lifetime of a human being, 84 years, is made of 7 times 12. So, or 12 times 7. But let's think for a moment about 7 times 12. These are all very fundamental numbers, very fundamental cycles. The Saturn cycle incorporates the 7-year sub-periods as well. So it's something like Jupiter plus Saturn makes Uranus. That's how I'm thinking about it. And why in this way? Now, let's go back to houses and signs. In the past, because things were not very personal, the zodiac was king. And up to this day, many astrologers use it automatically like that as well. They put the zodiac first, the houses second, because it's easier on the one hand. There are so many systems of house division out there. People argue about them, which one is more accurate, which one is better to use. We can never reach an agreement, and that's not my point. My point is to contrast just two different things: all the whole sign systems and against all the non-whole sign systems, whatever they are, because they're two different approaches to astrology altogether, and to psychology, to human development, to how we're using what we know about all of this. Why? Because the house systems that are quadrant ones, either time-based or space-based, they say it is important to divide the wheel of your chart not just equally, 30 degrees as an equal step, because that's very universal. Everybody's like that. This is governed by the zodiac in principle. But the moment we use another system, we take into account where the person was born on the surface of the earth, the location as well. For example, if you're using Regiomontanus or Campanus, and I'm using Regiomontanus in my example here, and this then gives you an equal distribution from the moment of the ascendant. So let's go to the charts so you can see what I'm talking about. And this is just an experiment from my end. This is like let's say a theory, which I decided I would use the method of Profections in a slightly modified way. And I'm still to begin experimenting with that. So I made a quick experiment with my own chart. And what I revealed for myself was really telling and really interesting, I think. So me and Emo, very interestingly for you maybe, have the same ascendant up to the degree, same descendant, same MC, and same IC. So all the 4 angles that you're looking at are very similarly distributed charts as angles. Almost the same, but obviously the signs and everything else is different. And I'm 9 years older than you, so the nodes are opposite each other. Yeah. So okay, I didn't know what you had prepared for today, and you don't know what I've prepared. I didn't know what I was preparing until a few hours back. So let's see where this gets us. This is showing that we're starting from the same starting point, but I'm not going to switch to whole signs. But I will consider my first perfection year as the year spanning between 23 or 24th degree of Taurus to the 24th degree of Gemini. And then moving 30 degrees per year, because we're following the same technique of time-wise equating, when we spoke about the degrees of the zodiac several weeks back, if you remember, we mentioned how every degree of the zodiac is not just the path of the sun during the year, and they don't correspond completely, because 1 year is 365 days when we have 360 degrees. But we say that the way degrees work in astrology of every zodiac sign is also about the correspondence between the Earth going around its axis, around its own axis, and also at the same time going around the sun during the year. That's how we move 1 degree step by step. So that's why I'm keeping to 30 degrees per year. But I use the ascendant points, whatever degree. I also consider the Sabian symbols very important and very revealing. We've spoken about this many times before. So it makes things more personal and more specific when we get into that as well, I think. This is just my opinion. You can use whatever you want. But here I started 23, Taurus. And then you can see that in this chart, interestingly, many things fall on the 23rd degree. So out of all the house cusps, I've got the house cusp of the second house, again on the 23rd degree, now in Gemini. Then fifth house starts at 23 Leo. The seventh house, the descendant, starts at 23 Scorpio. Eighth house, 23 Sagittarius. And also the 11th house, 23rd, 24th degree technically, of Aquarius. So many times I see this number here. Then my Jupiter, which is singleton in the charts, is on another sign's 24th degree, Aries. I've got Uranus on the 24th degree, on the cusp of the 8th house as well. So these just pointing out for you. And dividing things like this, these markings here are where each 30 degree step takes me on my chart. And the result is that in my so-called invented first perfection year, I have only the first house involved and whatever goes on in this first house. And then following the same logic to what Emo explains, which is the original technique. But then when I go to the second period, I have a mixture between the second house and the third house, because in my personal chart, these two houses happen to be small. They include in themselves less number of zodiacal degrees. So when I go through as experiences, as lifetime happenings of anything related to the areas of the second and the third house, they overlap in a certain period of time in my life, which is shorter. It's not exactly as long as the other one. While certain other houses are more accentuated. Like you can see, I have a huge 12th house, a huge 6th house, and they are taking more of those periods of life when certain things need to be faced. So second period, second and third house, third period, end of the third house to the very cusp of the fifth house. And I think it's important that in some cases, if you make the same experiment in your own chart, you may discover things like this, that the end of a certain period and the beginning of the next is corresponding to either the position of a planet in your chart by degree or the position of a house cusp. And again, to me, house cusps are very important transition areas of learning how to kind of leave behind, but at the same time transfer the experience of one house into what comes next as a process to the next house. So using this wheel, I made that, which I can propose to you as a template. And this is based on my chart. This is basically a summary looking through what's happening during 1 to 12 perfection years, adding one extra element to the logic, which is, now, I didn't find it very logical that from year 2 of our life, when we're still babies, we move straight away to the second house, and then very quickly 1 year after to the third, very quickly to the, yeah, there is a certain logic behind that, and we can really justify this. But that's a separate way of thinking about it. Why not think for a moment about 7-year periods, 12 of them? So what if the first profection year could also be made parallel to the first 7 years of our life, when we are most likely going to be dealing with our first house? Some people will also be incorporating themes of their second house if the first house is relatively small. Maybe in certain very rare cases, there would be a third house involved as well. Or this could happen later in life, say during the fourth period or the fifth period. We can have more than one houses playing into the experiences. So that's what's happening with me, just as an example. So you can maybe apply this to yourself if you wish. Starting with year 1, and I think of that as early childhood, formative years of childhood. We are here between the 23rd degree of Taurus and the 23rd degree of Gemini. And if we go back to the chart, we can see that here, this is the entirety of my first house. So for the first degree of the first house to the very end, the cusp of the second house. And the ruler is Venus. So what I do here is I say entire first house, then I've got Venus involved because that's the ascendant. Venus is in the 6th house of Scorpio, so that here I'm taking into account the other house that I'm being referred to by the position of Venus. And also Mercury, which is also in my case in the 6th house in Scorpio, because in my first house, I don't have just Taurus. I have Taurus and Gemini. Even Taurus is just a little bit. It's right at the end of Taurus where my ascendant is. But the whole of the rest of the territory of this first house, where I would experience my self-expression, I mean, at the same time in the very first year of my life, but also presumably in the first 7 years of my life, I will be teaching myself about those first house experiences. I think these two are both involved, and they are mixing their influences together. And then in the last column of the chart, I'm making a note for myself. What are they doing in my birth chart? Venus and Mercury. So Venus is conjunct Mercury in my chart. They are in the same sign, in the same house. So that appears to be important somehow. There is a whole stellium in Scorpio, and both of them are part of that stellium. So right from year 1, I need to address the very crowded 6th house, that everything is kind of pointing towards that 6th house. And also, maybe it will be interesting to note that Venus is the chart ruler. Maybe she's a little bit more important than Mercury, but still Mercury is playing into that, mutual relationship and effect. And also Mercury conjunct Pluto is the closest aspect I've got in my chart. So here, I think this should be watched. And like Emo demonstrated, then we can overlay in that particular period the transits to see what these two planets are doing, how they are behaving. Also look at progressions. Yes, you're so right that everything is speaking the same. It's kind of how can I say? It's singing the same tune. The progressions, the transits, the profections, as we can see, they all point us to the same themes. So moving on, in the second year, now here the situation is different. I'm not dealing just with one house, with one sign. I'm again dealing with two signs. Here, Mercury continues the theme because going back to the charts, you see that the cusp of the second house is Gemini. So here we've got Mercury continuing, but then Cancer is overlapping because Cancer is the cusp of the third house and where we continue zodiacally from there. These two incorporate the majority of my second and third houses. So in that second period, I would look at that, and the experiences I would expect will be a mixture of those two houses. Then, could you see the table again? As I change it in a different way? Or are we in the chart still?
We're still on the chart.
Okay, then. So now should be all right, yes?
Yep.
Okay. And the notes quickly that the moon is angular in the chart, so the moon gets involved in the 7th house. Now 6th and 7th house mix up them their influences with the 2nd and the 3rd. And it's just, to me, it appears important that the moon is angular. I need to watch any transits over my moon in this period. And also that Mercury conjunct Pluto continues to be important. So maybe it was already clear from the way Emo presented it that this whole thing is about different points of our charts being activated at different points of our life, and kind of stress themes or themes that we have the chance to develop or to influence in the direction that we want to work consciously into. So it's I see it more as an opportunity. Yes, there would be things happening around us that would naturally push us into this direction, and we would have to deal with these things. But also, it's very important what we can personally do so that we play out the energy in the way that we decide to, and not just kind of leave ourselves to be guided by it. Maybe it's a mixture of both. I don't know. Then I won't go through every single one here. I don't want to bore you with this. This is just my chart. But I think get it. What's the logic? So first of all, we note the age period. So for example, when we get to the 3rd one, this will be when I'm 14 to 21. This will be the span of the zodiac that would be affected. And then I make a note of what houses this span of the zodiac corresponds to, and the rulers of the 2 signs that fall into the sector, and what these planets are doing in my chart. And then when I did this exercise from 1 to 12, certain patterns started emerging. And they are, for example, that in the first period, 0 to 7, I've got Venus and Mercury ruling the soul. And then we come to age 28 to 35, which is where I am now. I'm 33 now. And here again, we've got Mercury and Venus, the same planets. So maybe we could, if we explore that further, maybe in this period, I'm not just dealing with what I'm dealing with, astrologically signified by Mercury and Venus and the relevant houses, but also this rings back to early childhood somehow. So it's also an opportunity to work with the same energies or with the same functions in the chart that were under stress in that other 7-year period. And maybe this is not very relevant because this other period was very early in life, but who knows? You know how much we form ourselves and our destiny that early on in the unconscious period of, before 7. So I think it's definitely significant. Then there is this one, age 35 to 42, when everything will be about the 6th house. Why? Because here, it's this one here, from the 23rd degree of Libra to the 23rd degree of Scorpio. And you see that because I have a huge 6th house, it starts in the 6th and it ends at the very end of the 6th. So this whole thing is only about this house. And I happen to have a stellium in that house, and all the planets are incorporated within these zodiac degrees. It also ends exactly on the descendant, which I think is a very important boundary line. And it is concentrating on Venus and Mars. So Venus because Libra, Mars because Scorpio. These 2 signs are within the 6th house. And they are in mutual reception in the chart. So many things we can read from this. For example, I can probably make the conclusion that in this period of my life, and that's something so personal, in other person's chart, if you do the same exercise, it will be other planets involved in other houses, and everything will be very different. So between age 35 and 42, it will be a Mars-Venus period for me, where I will be able to balance the two energies, maybe, if I manage to understand the messages correctly. And they are also the rulers of my nodes. So Mars rules the north node, Venus rules the south node. And I do agree with you, Emma, that when the nodes are involved, that's something that we need to pay attention to. We can't disregard it. So, not to mention everything else, that the sixth house is also involved. The descendant is now involved as it's being crossed by this whole thing. And it is basically a big stress period. So immediately it becomes apparent for me that out of all of the, so if I'm lucky enough to live up to 84, let's say all of the span of 84 years, this particular 7-year cycle is more important, more kind of stressing the main themes of my chart than any other, basically. So I would suggest that in this way you can discover what would be the more faithful, not just years, particular years, but periods of life for a person. Some people live their best years, or when I say best years, I mean the most active, the most life-changing or transformative, or I don't know, ages of discovery or change of direction, whatever, in particular stage of their life. And it's not the same for everybody. Yeah. And I think I'm now very interested to see what's coming. This period is starting for me only after 2 years, and it's going to span up to the mid-age of the point when Uranus comes to the middle of its cycle, the Uranus opposition, which you know all how important that is. Age 42.
Radlina, wouldn't you just use Fedaria for that, like to look at larger spans of periods?
I admit I have no idea what that is. So that's something maybe you can.
Fedaria, you basically have a span of years, which you're talking about, where like a planet becomes dominant, and then like it has pairings to it. So depending on your age, there's a Fedaria calculator online.
Yes.
Put in your date of birth, and it'll tell you which period of your life you're in Fedaria, and which planet, and hence the house, is most active, and then its relationships with the planets. Because I mean, Profections is wonderful, and I think it's really, really important. I mean, I'm a whole sign person. I like traditional astrology. I understand people like to use Placidius and Regius and all that kind of stuff, right? But when you got some like Profections, you can use both. You can be like, you can use Placidius for other things, but when it comes to Profections, maybe just switch to the whole sign system and just use it as intended, because the logic behind this, you are constantly going to be in sixth house energies for much of your life. And you like, by this logic, you're only going to hit your 10th house energy, which is your career, which was 56 and 63, which kind of sucks, right? Because like,
I don't really agree with you here, because it all depends on how we interpret the houses and their significance. To me, the zodiac and the houses are more like a process of maturation. So the early on we are kind of makes sense also. Not that what you're saying is not true, but on another perspective, the early houses are more relevant to early life experiences. The more you go forward in the houses, the more you can touch on in a more mature way about what really the 10th house, for example, is a late house. And maybe we can't really understand how to function in that late house until we are older and until we have the experience or the accumulated whatever Saturnian style accumulation we need in order to maybe, for example, professionally, what this house is mostly connected to traditionally. How could you really not just be somebody important or earn a lot of money or have a good reputation, something like this, but really achieve a status out there which is built in a Saturnian step-by-step over the process of maturation way. So I don't know, this is again very personal. Why not a whole sign, and why? Because the other systems are really showing a more individualized kind of. My journey is meant to be mostly unequally unbalanced, in an unbalanced way, concentrated on the sixth house. The actual chart shows it. We don't even need to use techniques of calculating timing of things to come to that conclusion. Only by looking at a chart like mine, you can see that this person has something very specific to do. Maybe they would miss out on a lot of experiences. Maybe a lot of experiences will be there because all houses are there. We all go through experiences related to all the houses, but some of them are more of our business to deal with than others. There are people with very mixed charts where many houses are represented by planets in them. They are just a different case, a different specific scenario, and they also can benefit, I think, from this technique, because if we do that same thing with them, we would have all sorts of various things coming year after year, 7-year period after 7-year period, lots of changes, changes of direction, and so on. So evolutionary astrology as well, this concentrating on the nodes, and not just the nodes, but anything could be karmic in the chart. Anything could be hinting us towards this chart and this lifetime being just one step of a longer journey. Let's put it this way, whatever it is and however we want to think about it. And I consider that my step-by-step 7-year periods, which I think are fundamental for everybody's development, and they make sense in the context of the Uranus cycle and the Jupiter cycle as well. It's just an invention. So this thing, I don't know about the other technique you mentioned. What number of years does it divide the periods of life in? Do you know? Is it a particular number of years, or is it another way?
Yeah, it's formulaic. So it's I believe it's equal. So I have to double check. It's one thing I have to revise. But I mean, I know, for example, in the current stage of my life, I'm in the moon is the dominant planet, and then I think it's Venus, I think, is a Fadaria pairing. So I look at where they are in the houses systems, and that will have a big impact on my kind of the themes of this particular year. And likely next year as well, the Fadaria will change. It'll be a moon and a different pairing. I can't remember.
Do you mind writing in the chat the word you're using? I'm not familiar with what you're saying, and I can't understand exactly the word.
There you go.
Daria, thank you.
We have like in terms of cycles, we have Saturn return. Like everyone, your Saturn return is a big stinger. The way I see astrology is there's 12 zodiac cycles, and I completely agree with you. They each represent like maturation into, you come to the 12th house, which is like returning to source, returning to one, the universe, which is why it is a very spiritual house, and the first is very much about you. But I think the way it works, it's almost like it's a clock for me. It's like, as we mature during life, the way I see it is that we have 12, 24, 36, it adds layers. So you have to go through the zodiac in order to have that first layer of maturation. Like, for example, Eno is 24, so he's done 2 cycles of zodiac. I'm 36, I've done 3 cycles. When I'm 48, I've done 4. And you build that layer upon layer.
Yeah, but the zodiac is not the houses. That's what the distinction I would like to make. What you're saying makes really very perfect sense of how we discover different sections of the zodiac as we grow older and year by year, which is something I would use in combination with this. You see, here I've got the ages, like the standard Profections technique ages, which are related to each period. So you don't need to take my 7-year idea, but we can look at it step by step in the zodiac. But when we come to the houses, I have a bit of a problem, because to me it doesn't make sense that we from age 0 to age 12, we get experience from all the 12 houses. Maybe not entirely. Maybe we're concentrating on a particular area, which is areas of experience. Well, for everybody it won't be. If we do this personally applied to a birth chart, we see that every person concentrates on different areas of life disproportionately during their lifetime. Some people never touch on certain houses very much. Some people concentrate in excess on other houses, like I think it will be my case. Kate, thank you for mentioning the Saturn return, because that's another thing I wanted to, maybe I'll finish with this, to show you what I uncovered by doing that exercise. This is the time when the second Saturn return would be. So this is that one here. Could you all see that? So this is the 9th year, let's say, or the 9th step. This corresponds to ages 20, 32, 44, 56, 68 in the normal sequence. And with me, this is here. So we start from, let me just say, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So, okay, we have Capricorn and Aquarius involved in the picture. So it starts from Capricorn, it ends at Aquarius. And both of these are ruled by Saturn. Going back here. So we've got 2 times Saturn. Saturn in the 7th Sagittarius and Saturn in the 7th Sagittarius. So these are the 2 pointers I've got. They are in no other case during the sequence did I have a coincidence. It was always 2 different planets involved. Here we've got just Saturn. And also it's the end of the 9th house and the entirety of the 10th house. The 10th house, Saturn. Yeah, so double message, double Saturnian message. So here, that's why I've noted for myself, Saturnian themes repeat themselves again and again. And on top of everything else, that's exactly the period of life, which is between 56 and 63, right in the middle of which is the 2nd Saturn return. So I thought this is just my chart, my case. That won't be like that. In other cases, you may discover coincidences like that based on something different. And when you try to analyze a person's lifetime, not just their day-to-day immediate needs, immediate curiosity about what's going to happen next year and how interesting that could be or how fateful that could be, but more putting the whole thing into a bigger lifetime context, I think this could also be very helpful. And then you can overlay into this the actual standard original technique of Profections year by year, but I would also stick to the house systems that are making sure that I'm not given the same portion of the sky for each section of my experience, because my understanding and my experience with charts and with clients and with everybody and everything I have observed is always that things are very nuanced with the houses, that you can really see how, in my case, the 2nd and the 3rd house are very intertwined. Same with the 8th and the 9th house. Well, the 6th stands alone, the 12th stands alone, the 7th stands alone. And it's just another way, which I think is really making it more specific and more empowering, because that is more of an approach to astrology, I think, which is having behind itself the message of you are not totally bound to the energetic, magnetic patterns of the universal zodiac energies. There is one level up from that. Yes, they are always there as a background, as an influence. They would always be valid. But in combination with them, if we add the space factor and the time factor of the individual person living their life here on this planet and born exactly on that moment, yeah, that's the ascendant. The exact degree of the ascendant is important for that reason. Then we have a more of a designed person-specific journey, which I think these sorts of coincidences here can hopefully show you that it pays off as well. These are the other 2 coincidences which I'll mention, and I'll finish with that. For example, 42 to 49 has a concentration on Mars and Jupiter. Well, the same happens with the same planets, coincidentally, between 70 and 77. So from that, I may think, okay, if I do a particular kind of work when I'm between my 42nd and 49th year, maybe it can come to fruition, or maybe it can come to some sort of continuation. There will be some result out of that connection in that other period of life, potentially. Obviously, this is all potentiality. This is nothing that's guaranteed that that's going to happen, but it isn't with any technique. It's just, for me personally, it's more interesting to try to step back and synthesize the bigger picture so that the individual events that we are subject to can make sense. And it's not just how intense and how interesting something was, but what's the meaning of that within the context of my life? Where does it fit? And this is the question that is mostly interesting for me. And the Profections were an addition that is amazing, because this allows me now to to play with this way and to explore how it is with everybody I work with. What do you think? Do you like that? Do you think that's something that you can use as well? Or would you change it in some other way? Because that's just like an idea in progress. It's by no means totally very thoroughly thought through. But
Can I just say something, Radilina?
yes, Simon.
And really, I'm just saying this from the top of my head, really, not in any way from any of the techniques that you've talked about. But what's come to me is, that it's the movement of what, in fact, what you and Emo have described to me, there is something to do with a spiral.
Mm-hmm.
It's very much a spiral kind of movement, and it shows the immense complexity of the personality and also of life. And the way you were describing how, for example, at 47 or whatever, you were involved with something and that it would come to the fruition only at 72, whatever, it all again takes me back to the idea of the seed,
Mm-hmm.
And how many seeds can be seedling in our lives at different times, and
Yes.
that they also are at different stages.
Exactly.
It becomes incredibly creative. I mean, it's so creative that maybe we can't even fathom it ourselves. I mean, this is just the kind of just opening it up very, very slightly.
Yes. Well, maybe you noticed that I'm basing all this again on the humanistic vision of what astrology is. Well, I wouldn't say it's supposed to be used for, because anyone can use it for whatever they want, however they want. But it's one of the, let's say, to me, most interesting, unexplored, uncharted territories, which can be so fruitful, that inspires me the most to work with it, is how we can self-individuate in a very conscious way, be the kind of the guiding principle of our own life could be coming from us, through exploring the charts in a so-called humanistic, person-centered perspective. And that's what is missing for me in the whole sign traditional astrology techniques. They are great, they're very interesting, they're very harmonious in their geometry, and the universe at the end of the day is also very geometrical, so that these same principles, they work as well. They're not contradictory to each other. But what I'm trying to say is we're moving on maybe to another stage. This whole entering into the age of Aquarius, and all the changes that we're witnessing, with people wanting answers, people wanting to understand themselves better, understand other people better, the workings of the psyche. This is all for the reason of being able to design our own approach to how to play with the energies. The chart is the chart. We're never going to change the potentialities that we're given. And then the influences of the transits and the progressions that are going to hit us every now and then and challenge our integrity. Our integrity is a birth chart. And this will be a long, like lifelong battle between the two. But what we can do to be participants in that, I think, is by, first of all, seeing what's the most individuated story we can charter, which, I mean, to the moment, maybe they would develop ways of seeing charts in 3D, because this is a 2D chart. Yeah, would it not be very interesting to see the position of the bodies of the planets in 3D, so we can see exactly where they are, not just horizontally, but also vertically to one another? And that would be another level of exploration, even more personal, even more specific. But I just wanted to suggest to you, in our enthusiasm to make things quick and easy and understandable, are we not missing sometimes another thing that's, it's probably a bit annoying that not all the houses in my chart are very equal, and we need to interpret one this way, the other one the other way. There are mixture of factors, but actually, that's really what's more real. That's really what's more personal. Because if you look at my chart and Emo's chart, at whole sign, without planets inside, they are the same, exactly the same. we are obviously not the same, isn't it? So when transits go through these areas, they're supposed to be affecting us. Well, we're not disregarding the planets in the houses, but relatively similarly. But actually, we can see how if we do this, we see that other things play into the picture that make it more likely that I would use things in one way, you would use them in a completely different way, even though it's the same transit over the same house cusp. The ascendant, the descendant, and so on. Well, it becomes very philosophical. I'm sorry if this is very heavy, but I was very enthusiastic to show you this because I think that's something like an alternative way, and that's my personal way, which I've never so far in all of our discussions, I've never been triggered to speak about it very much. But lately I have been thinking about it, and today with this technique, I was thinking, where do I go with this technique? Something doesn't make sense with this very quick transference between one house to the other. But then when I thought of Uranus and the 84 years, it really makes sense to me. 7 by 12. And yeah. What else would you like?
I have a comment.
Yes, Evan.
I just find it amazing, that you're creating your own system and that you kind of put this together. I can really see the reasoning behind it, and I get it. Like it makes sense to me intuitively, and I think impressed is maybe not the right word, but just um, maybe grateful for the kind of creative energy that goes behind what you put together. I can see that it's something that you just downloaded for yourself. And so for me,
Thank you
it's
very much. That's not
exciting.
very typical for me. I'm not that Aquarian usually. That's only sparks of this thing every now and then, very rarely. But yes, I think we shouldn't be afraid to, I don't want to reinvent the soldier or anything like that. But maybe it's up for update sometimes. People are not the same people as those that lived 2000 years ago, 1000 years ago. We are dealing with different social things. We're dealing with different personal things. So it's within the rules. So following the logic of what we already know, the cycles that we already, have studied, why not just try to experiment a little bit every now and then and just juxtapose things one over the other. And I wanted to see what will come out of this. And so I thought, yeah, certain interesting things came in my chart. I haven't done it for others yet, but I would like to and see how it goes, like for relatives, friends. It's most interesting for older people because, especially if you, for example, your mom, your dad, if you're younger, because then you can go back and ask questions. What happened in this particular 7-year period? What was the main theme of it? And maybe certain periods weren't that eventful, while others were extremely eventful. And if we see how this is reflected in the chart, that could be something to work.
The other thing that came up just now, because earlier when Kate was asking you, well, then the 10th house wouldn't really happen until you're, I don't know what it was, like 52. So that would be what, 7?
Mm.
And I was thinking to myself, well, it kind of makes sense, but this portion of the 7-year periods, because your career, right, your public image, the thing that you're bringing to this planet doesn't really come to fruition until you're older, when you've actually done all the work.
Yes.
And then after that, by the time you reach the 12th, and then you kind of do this 82-year period, 84, whatever, that is kind of the time at which you pass away into the unity of the whole. So in that perspective, I just like the interpretation that it offers, like the philosophy that it stirs within me about how the arc of a lifetime actually works, which I can't comment on very much, being the youngest person here, but it's something very interesting. So thank you.
Yes, but also at the same time, this doesn't mean that the 10th house or the 12th house is not active for the person in other ages. When they're younger, it's still, maybe you have a 10th house stellium, and that's active from day one, but it's more a journey towards that. Everything in the chart, especially the sun, to me is a journey towards discovering and unlocking and realizing the potential that all of these things hold. So I, as you can see from my table, everything constantly points back to the 6th house because obviously everything's there, and it's more likely to have rulers of houses that are pointing back to the 6th house. But if we follow my logic of a continuous development over life, I wouldn't reach the sixth house from very early. Maybe it will be midlife or something like this. And even though it's like a preparation, it's doing work, sixth house work, but maybe the main concentration on it will be when I come to that sixth house period. And then these two things will overlay each other. So that's why in the thing I noticed when is the moment when certain important themes in the chart, in my case a stellium, overlay with the periods. So that was this here when 35 or 64, when the sixth house is accentuated, and when at the same time the planets that are related to that. So this is step 5 in the journey. Yeah, just happens to be. But for another person, could be. What about a young child that becomes famous? Like let's say a talent, creative talent, or something like that, that becomes very prominent and famous when they are very young. And the peak of the career, 10th house thing, could happen very young. That doesn't mean though that the person is mature enough to understand the reality of the 10th house as such, as a general human experience. Yeah, does that make sense? Or yeah, okay. Okay. I'm sorry, I'm not very cautious about time. I really want to let also Dwayne make his presentation. Dwayne, are you with us yet? Let's have some general questions or discussion of what we discussed so far. If you want, we can also make a quick break again, because today it was too much information from all sorts
And I'd love to also do something that followed from what Emilian had said as well.
Okay, do you want to do it now, Lauren? And then we still have plenty of time. We have an hour. So if you want to do that, and then we can have Dwayne as well.
I don't care, however you want to organize it. Mine follows more of what what we heard from Emma.
Yeah, understandably, because I deviated quite a lot. But yes,
and I'm very good with, I like that you take things in your own way, and I actually think each of us uses our own life and our own personality, and I'd even say maybe the planets or galaxies that are our origins, and then we use what we who we are to and use the tools. And that's why I think it's so important to personalize the information. Is it real? Does it work? How does it work? And some of the generalizations, I had some of my biggest awakening, well, from very young, but also in my 20s of a huge spiritual breakthrough. So where I was united with everything as well. And so it doesn't necessarily, you don't have to wait for a certain year for it to happen.
Mm-hmm.
Well, anyway.
Sometimes it happens in a particular year.
I can only speak. I don't have anything to show. If I was thinking maybe do you have the capacity, Emma, to put my thing on my chart on?
Yeah, you can, of course, if you want to share.
Way of the whole sign.
Yeah, do you want to share, Lauren? You can share your own screen.
It won't be very long.
Okay, no problem. Go for it.
All right, Lauren, give me your details, girl.
Okay. So it's March 25th, 1953, and 4:26 a.m. in Washington, D.C.
How would I even, where
you
is that?
You have to put Washington, D.C. for the city-state. Yeah, like that.
And then it's
Washington, D.C.
District
of Columbia, but it should come forward.
Okay, what if I put Virginia?
No, I'm not in Virginia.
No, you put D.C. there, where it says city-state.
That's District of Columbia.
And remove the D.C. from the Washington, as it's confusing the system.
Okay, thank you. Houses, whole sign. You want to do this whole sign, Lauren, or Placidus?
Yes, whole sign. Just whatever you are teaching or your presentation is how I based what I'm talking about.
All right, girl.
From what you had said.
Go ahead.
Does that make sense? Okay, yes.
Anything you want me to put up, just tell me.
Well, no, I mean, I'll just say what you had told me that the eighth house is, well, from that chart, I saw the eighth house is this year. I'm 67, and Virgo is my ascendant. Is that correct for this year?
The Lord of the Year. Yep.
Lord of the Year is Virgo. So I just took the information, and I was trying to corroborate it because I am one of those people who have, I've lived a longer time. So I took the year 7. I don't know if it helps to have my chart up there, but I took the year 7, 19, 31, 43, 55, and 67 to just look at the corroborations of it. I look at an eighth house year potentially as the house of death and rebirth, endings and beginnings. So then I thought, okay, and Virgo, I think of it anyway. So if the year, I'll go with the year 7. I had a huge event of my appendix was about to burst. I was in 2nd grade, and I was taken emergency to the hospital.
You know the date of that?
I don't. I don't know the date of it. I just know I was 7. It was in the 7th year, 2nd grade, maybe in the fall. And that's all I can quite remember. But it was such a big event, and I recited it to myself, everything that happened for years. I didn't want to ever forget it. But what happened is I also began I don't know what happened exactly. I told you I have been very psychic in my life. Where when I went to kindergarten when I was 5, I was shocked I could read everyone's mind and felt like, wow, people have such mean thoughts. I didn't know that, and that's difficult of separating myself from all the things I received. Well, when I was 7, I began to have extra experiences. I don't know how you could call it. I still don't know exactly what happened, but I'd call it the funny feeling is coming again. And I would, my parents were concerned. And so this started, I especially remember that in the hospital. Maybe it was what they gave me in the drugs or whatever they did to put me under. But it took until many, many years for this funny feeling to leave, where I could extra hear everything, like sounds were super loud. Everything was different. I like would switch in and out of reality, the way I normally experience it and the way it was. So I looked at that as a doorway changing. They took me to the hospital later. My parents were concerned because I would say, I am awake and this is happening. I'm seeing all this stuff. And instead they put all this electrodes on my brain. Okay, and said I had adult brainwaves at a child and I'd grow into myself, but I didn't have any mental disturbance. Everything was normal. Just my patterns were too strong for my young age. Okay, but anyway, I remembered it as very significant, and it lasted for a long time, where I began to feel this kind of death of who I was and a new beginning of having more than one thing happen. And it was scary. At 19, I had been really super smart, like straight A's always, uh, and like music was in the background. And I entered Oberlin, conservative. No, at first I entered the college as a math major and a science major. My mother was a high level scientist. She was at Princeton she was one of the people who solved the problems to drop the bomb on Hiroshima. And my father was a PhD in physics, a particle physicist. And so I was real smart too in science and math. But in my 2nd year at 19, I decided that I needed to, I had had an experience in going off in music therapy and saw what music could do for people. And I had done music since I was a child. and took lessons since I was 4 years old in piano and never stopped and everything. So at that moment at 19, I made the decision that I would have a better life if I dropped the idea of being a mathematician or a scientist and went full into music education and brought music out into the world. So to me, that was a death of I still kept on I still kept on my studies in the college, but was accepted into the Conservatory of Music, and then began my music path, where I was full time going to graduate also in music and music education and performance. So that was a transition from the mathematical side, and I thought my parents would be really disappointed in me because, you know, they were so proud that I was so smart in the math thing, and now I was going to do music. And their idea was any dummy can do music. You know, they just looked at music as it's not an intellectual thing. But for me, I knew I was going to have the life that I was to have. At that point, when I graduated, I went to Ibiza, Spain, and within 3 weeks of landing on the island, I was offered a job teaching music at the international school in Ibiza,
Wait, Lauren,
Spain.
can you give us some dates just so we can look at what Mercury's doing since he's ruler of the eighth? For any of this stuff, if you have dates, it's just useful to put them up. If not, it's
Okay. So that was at 19. I would be that would be 1970. I think 1972. Does that make sense? When I was 19. Let me think. Let me add it. 1953 plus 19. Yeah, in 1972, and that
April.
decision to go from math to music was in the January of 73. Then in 73 is when I did that. So that was during that period.
Okay.
That makes sense. And
So Mercury was making a contact with the North Node here, which is interesting.
yes,
Jupiter was being burned, but anyway, go on, just so we can take a look and we can study for
yeah.
ourselves.
Yes, and so I looked at that. It was a big door ending and door opening at that 19-year-old thing that had changed my life. And as I said, I've done music since a child, but I always thought of it more like a hobby. So then it became my profession, and the universe agreed with it in that I was in love with this guy I had met in another thing that happened. Is that true? It was the end and the beginning of a relationship at that same time in 1972, September 1972. My childhood, my teenage high school romance ended suddenly in September of 1972. And I thought I would never meet someone else like that. And like 2 weeks later, I met the man who left school and lived in Ibiza, and that's who I went to see. So that was very September 1972. So one door closed and the other door opened. And
And
so
did you marry him? Did you marry this man?
no, I was asked to marry. I had many I was asked to marry him, but I didn't want. I was always said no. I'm married to my art. I'm married to being a musician. I don't want to be married to a man. That was my idea.
Look at Venus was transiting your moon. Okay, and then Mercury was opposite himself around this time. Anyway, go on, just to point some things out.
I even considered the Neptune, because the Neptune was in the previous one in whatever date we had. Neptune was being activated, and again, Neptune's over the midheaven. When we talk about music, I always think about the Neptune influence. And it's really interesting when you said you were psychic, because I was looking for Pisces, because usually it's heavy Pisces, but then obviously Neptune was substitute. Neptune has aspects to Pluto, to Uranus, and your ascendant. And it's conjunct with Saturn. So I was thinking, what makes someone psychic? And sometimes we interpret it as the moon. If someone has very strong moon energies or very stellium in Pisces, something like that. But actually, it looks like you've got a very strong, you've got an exact trine to the ascendant. You've got a very strong sextile to Pluto. and you got a loose kind of square to Uranus. But it's interesting how all those major points and planets are being hit by that. I think Neptune and Saturn's a big part of your life, particularly with Saturn being the ruler of your ascendant as well. And it seems like when looking at the transits of the dates that we were shown, it looks like that, I think it's called by shared light or inference of light, like the Neptune and Saturn were being activated. I think in the previous chart that we saw, it was being activated by Uranus, which of course means sudden change in the ninth house, which is about higher learning. So you switching from science to music kind of makes sense, because it's like I'm bringing a sudden change and end to that and a shift in what I do. Yeah.
I find it interesting that you made this. I mean, you said it was in 1973. For the relationship ending here, I find it interesting that Mercury, ruler of the eighth, was in the eighth and he was opposing himself from the second, right? Change of heart, change of mind. Venus being here conjunct with the moon gives another indication of shift in relationship, seventh house. This together with the south node. The nodes in general are held by Saturn, and you have the Saturn Neptune here, which is what Kate was talking about. Just pointing out some, and you had Saturn here that was exactly square T square your natal Mercury and transiting Mercury in transit, holding the nodes. So just a few things to point out in terms of the way these things are shifting.
And it was huge. I mean, I was so dramatic about relationship. And it's when I look back on it, it's like, what? But it was very big. And with both of those men, the one from the childhood or from teenage years, the second I met him, there was the connection. And the same with the man that I met when I was 19. 2 weeks later, it was instant. It's like the whole room went dark except for him. That type of thing, that very clear connection. And then he becomes the man that brings me to my future, which was so important to get me to Spain, because part of my whole work in music has been to bring forth that period in when the Jews, Arabs, and Christians lived in Spain. And I was put into medieval Spain in the sense where I lived in Ibiza was not just the hip part of it, was with the old Ibisencos. I lived without electricity, running water, no electricity, in a house a couple hundred years old in isolation. So anyway, that was such a huge shift. Thank you for all that of understanding why. Should I go? The next period said was 31. Well, I towards it during that from 19 to 31, I did music like crazy. I taught at the international school, but I also performed all through Europe. Ended up studying early music, medieval Renaissance, and went to a school in Basel, Switzerland, got my master's degree, toured all over with lute players, sponsored by it was just a nonstop music career. And also very research based and also very humanitarian. Then there's the year 31. I had returned back to the States, and at that point I was tired of I call it all the free thinking, all the hippie life, and somehow my whole travels, I was tired of it. And I wanted to get married. I just wanted to get married. I wanted to find a man that I could marry. And at 31, I left so we're talking about the eighth house that's repeating itself. I left being single. As I said, up to that point, I had like 7 marriage proposals, and I always told them, no, I'm married to my music. Then I got married. I got engaged at 31 and closed down my house. I was still renting in Ibiza, Spain, and changed my life completely. So that was in, I believe, 1984 that would have happened. I was 31. And May 5th, 1984 is the date for that next period of time, where I met my husband to be. And the minute I met him, a part of anyway, it's a long story, but I just I immediately heard no, not for me. But then about 6 weeks later, he said, well, just keep my name as a friend and so forth like that. And then I connected with him, and I liked his dependability, his possessiveness of me at that point. You know, it felt like I really had a home that way. But that was the end of the single life and into the married life, or to be married and trying to fit back in the United States, because I've always felt so different. It was hard adjustment.
So
Okay, so then
Venus is returning here on that date, down in the 4th house. Could be relevant to what you're just saying.
Yes, because I had no desire. I was never a person who wanted to get married or have children. I was going to live a free life in my music and just serve, and always a service level of wanting to serve through my music. How can I assist the world? How can I raise the vibration? I was always very cracked open to that.
Transiting Pluto opposite the returning Venus, that's very significant also, I think. The transiting Pluto on the other side.
Okay. Yes.
And something else I want to point out, of course, the Venus conjunction Mars here. However, look, May 5th. So that would have been so you're in an 8th house year. That would have been the 2nd month ruled by Venus. Venus opposite Pluto, and then ruler of the year, Mercury, was opposite Saturn. Anyway, go on.
What does that mean to you?
Well, it depends, because if Mercury is the ruler of the year, right? And we think about Virgo in general as someone that has to do with, Virgo's kind of the one that prepares the rest of the zodiac so that it can meet the rest of the world, right? Because then comes Libra of partnership. For me, this is the time when you were kind of transforming yourself into this kind of final form where you were ready for this guy. And Mercury, like Aries in general, is the most intuitive, the sign that downloads everything. So this was kind of like the thing that just landed in your lap. And then opposite Saturn is when you start to make something real, something manifest. Of course, with Venus opposite Pluto, as she was returning, it's a relationship of gravity. And from that point on, this is a period in general when Pluto was transiting opposite Venus and Mars, where you kind of would be pulled into this kind of relational conquest with another person. That's what in general I think when I see Venus and Mars. But I think that you would have been the stronger one here, being that Venus is such a strong energy in your chart. Anyway, go on.
Okay.
A really high year though, because this is 1984. That would make her in a 7th year perfection, right? Isn't it 1985 would make you 30?
And that's the year I married. But 31, I was writing down that 31 was my the year of that I went from I was engaged to be married in that year. So I made that decision to marry someone.
And do you mind me asking, what kind of role did he play? Was he like what kind of job did he do? I mean, because you got a Leo 7th house with your moon and Pluto there.
He was a computer program. He was starting computer programming. He had been a sound engineer for heavy metal bands. He was kind of his own renegade. And so he was sort of but he was going to be steady in the sense he was starting out in computers. He was super smart and very I don't know what else to say about him.
Was he very independent? Was he?
No, he was really into me. He was really like, you're my woman, this is it. I mean, it was like I had been in relationships that were very flowing and very loose comparatively and very free, and he was very grounding to me.
Yeah, because that's what it is, like with Leo, right? So with 7th house Leo, those are the qualities that you're necessarily looking for in a partner as well. So someone who is like, Leos can be quite egocentrical, in a good way, they can seem as generous, but they can be quite possessive, like you're mine, like I'm the king, you're my queen kind of thing, and you don't get to see other people, but I may
And
be.
the thing is, later on, that became one of my least favorite qualities about him. But at that moment, I have to just admit that I had such a life of wandering and freedom and everything that somehow is what I wanted if I was going to marry someone and I was going to have children with them.
Yeah,
I
because
Was
didn't
that
see the downside.
was that the date when you married, the 5th of May?
No, that's when I met him.
That's when you met him. But
He
that's
had he'd seen me on I had already put out my first LP that was a double album. Talk about, and he had seen my picture from that, and he knew someone I knew. He knew my first boyfriend. They had been roommates, and he had always wanted to be with me. So he kind of went for me.
right. I just wanted to point out something about this date. The moon traveling through Cancer and on your Uranus. This Uranus in the natal chart is extremely sensitive. It's we have spoken about it with you. Maybe you remember that this is a Uranus out of bounds, which is not aspected. So in these cases, when I see outer planet not aspected, I always look at the transits of the same planets. And I think important things are very often related to when there is, in this case, Uranus important transit. In the previous charts that Emma was showing for your dates, I noticed that in the first one, Uranus was exactly on the Neptune-Saturn conjunction, which is extremely crucial for your life. You know how it plays out with the Mars-Venus conjunction on the other side, and this whole story that then unfolded with your husband later is also related to that conjunction. And then now in this one, Uranus is exactly on the MC. So it could be a change of direction towards, like, I'm not just married to my music now. Maybe I would like to be married to something or someone. I would kind of connect that to this a little bit, maybe not overstretching the the interpretation. But I think this Uranus, wherever Uranus has been, maybe you can make an experiment throughout the different stages of your life, as Uranus also goes with this 7 years, more or less. It changes signs every 7 years, more or less. So you can see how that was hitting different things in your chart.
So the actual marriage date was August 11th, 1985. Wow, there's a lot of 7th house there.
And 85 is a 9th house year, I guess. So what so I'll be ruled by Venus. Where did you get married?
I got married in California, no, in the East Coast, Washington, D.C., Silver Spring, Maryland. Silver Spring, Maryland. Those are 2 words, so Maryland, MD, and the Silver Spring, it's not Silvers. Yeah, that's it.
Okay.
So now that's the date of the marriage, right?
That's the date of the marriage.
Look, your ascendant was on top of your Neptune, Saturn.
Neptune.
But anyway, the ascendant moves fast, so it doesn't really matter. Venus ruled year. Venus was on your Uranus here. Look at that.
Look
Moon
at
was
the Uranus.
Wow.
Uranus again.
Yeah.
I think this Uranus is surprising you during
Mars was on the south node. This is like, hey girl, time to get to work. Jupiter was on the north node. Good morning. Okay.
Yeah, that's exact, isn't it there? Jupiter on the north node.
In the first house. Okay.
Maybe overstretching a little bit.
Okay, so I tried to act like I was normal. I had this other existence in my 20s, which was so different, like being taken back in time and then here I was in a suburb with a husband who wanted me to be more normal. He didn't like it that I would just dance freely, or he didn't like that my hair was very wild and curly. He preferred it anyway. There was a lot of, and then I had 2 children. I I just thought, okay, I'm going to do this. And I had 2 daughters when I was 35, 37. And then at the next junction point at 40, and throughout that time, I was nonstop doing my music. I endlessly, did albums, and I worked with groups, and I toured nonstop the United States and all kinds of stuff. So my music didn't stop. I had the 2 children. I had my husband. And then at 43, which is the next junction point of the 8th house mirror that we're looking at today, I was just divorced. It was the final divorce happened in, it was December 16th, 1986. And that's that door opening again. Now I'm a single woman. And I had my 2 children were 4.5 and 6.5. And I began to raise them by myself.
Wait, Lauren, 86? That would be when you're 33.
No, 96, excuse me. 1996. That was the final divorce. It took 2 years to
Uranus
divorce.
on the ascendant in Aquarius.
Where? Say that again. Wait a minute.
Uranus on the ascendant in Aquarius.
Okay.
First house, yeah.
And it took 2 years to divorce him. He didn't want to divorce me, and every time I agreed, and then it ended up being exactly at this 43 at this 1996, like the 8th house. So it had to wait those 2 years for the 8th house, for the door to shut and the door to open, to being single with the 2 children, raising them by myself.
Saturn was on your sun as well. That added to the trouble, maybe.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And it all felt like I couldn't stay married. He had done a lot of things that I uncovered that had been from the beginning of the marriage, but because I never really saw him totally, and he always had a lot of secrets. And I uncovered in 2 weeks, in October 13th, 1994, was the day that I discovered he had removed all the money of myself, my children, my parents, and all secretively to do whatever he did with it. He had like a...
It's all to do with the planets in your 7th house. Like, you're looking for moon, security, happiness. You're looking for authority figures, someone who's controlling, Pluto. So like, you inadvertently, you married that person because you were drawn to those qualities. A Leo, possessive. And so like, it's interesting when you say he was very secretive. Well, surprise, that's Pluto for you. It's just so interesting how you say he was very, he gave you security. Well, guess what? That's what your moon craves. I'm sorry, but it's like, you are always going to gravitate to this type of person. And I guess like the 7th house, what it says is like, these are the qualities that you look for in other people. But effectively, the lesson of the descendant and the 7th house is you need to find that within yourself, because it's hidden.
Yeah, I very much agree with you here, Kate, that we so often project the 7th house, whatever is there. It's very difficult to own it, isn't it? So we want to give the role to someone else out there to play it actively for us. And the unsatisfaction comes from the fact that they never can play it the same way that we're meant to play it. That's the sign.
Once you see those, like, you're looking for other people, but once you own it for yourself, because it's hidden from you, it's the descendant. It's where
Yes.
And the thing is, I had lived all those years. I am a person who doesn't like all the Virgo, doesn't like all the details. And so when he was going to do he did all the finances, but then because I didn't want to take that responsibility and do it. So I gave everything to him, everything I made, everything of my inheritance, everything. And he actually lost it all through his own hidden agendas. And so, but what happened is, in that year of, at that time of 43, that the divorce, I ended up not only having a regular life, but he had created $104,000 of credit card debt in my name as well, because in the state of California we moved to, it was all inherited. So it's like I got my worst nightmare times 100 of having to sort out then. And I had 2 small children, 4.5 and 6.5, and a career that was at a huge height. And I had to handle all these finances that, in a way, I tried to marry it away by, okay, you do the finances, I'll do everything else. So it was like, I look back at it as a huge lesson that I have to just face the things I don't like to do and do it myself.
Absolutely.
Such a lesson.
That's why the whole zodiac is there for. That's why the house system is there. It's basically the lessons that were learned from the South Node, descendant being in the 7th house. Like, it's Pluto, you could say, is synonymous with 8th house, Scorpio kind of thing. So, like, other people's money. So, you gave him all that control and that authority. You traded that for your sense of security and sense of happiness and stability, right? Moon. That's what moon is. And you just wanted to be in that. You wanted to be the queen because Leo, and the king is also Leo. You're looking for that energies in them, and unfortunately, you got bit. But because of that, right now you learned that lesson, which is the whole point of the house system, and you're learning to reclaim that kind of control, that power.
And it's never gone away. I mean, when I got my house, I built it all the way back up. That I have my house in Maui, and I remember when the deed came after. Anyways, when the deed came, it said Lauren Pomerantz, single woman, owner of the house. I felt so proud of myself that I had survived it, and I was able to find a way to keep going. And anyway.
Maybe that's where if you want, guys, let's leave on that note that maybe that's a suggestion. This wasn't the first time. This is like the karmic repetition from the past in the 7th house, node plus Pluto plus moon. Maybe that happened again before. And now you had a second chance to put it right in a similar setting, in a similar situation. And you did it better this time around, kind of thing.
Yes. So if I go now, I've got 2 in that chart. I'm now.
Lauren, I'm very sorry to interrupt you. I really would like you to finish what you prepared, but I'm concerned we only have 20 minutes. Dwayne has a presentation. How can you do it? Right. Do you want to maybe have the presentation, Dwayne, in the first part of next week so it's not rushed? Or how long is it? Like always, or a bit more, a bit less? I'm sorry, I muted everybody at some point, so including you.
I'm thinking 20 minutes should do it, but
okay.
I'm easy.
Are you guys happy to stay a little longer, maybe 10, 15 minutes longer, so Lauren can finish with the examples?
And I can just tell you what happened at 55 and what happened at 67 without looking at it, if you wanted.
No, let's look at it. Let's look at it.
I just say, well, will Dwayne still have time?
Yeah, that's what I was concerned about.
Yeah.
So if we stay a little longer.
You've almost been an hour, Lauren. I mean, I hate to say that, but it's been quite long. I mean, it's very interesting, but
okay, well, I actually, I originally just wrote out what happened in those years just to demonstrate the 8th house.
Well, anyway, it's not. It's not. It's not. I'm just thinking.
Our meetings are already so long. We are staying for 3 hours. I would hate to keep you guys longer than 3 hours. So
yeah, I mean, it's a question of sharing the time, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
And you said it was going to be short, but actually it's really, really long.
Okay, so please just realize that what this is all improvised. What I actually prepared was very short, and by adding all the charts to it is what has also taken the time that I didn't anticipate.
Good.
So it's not something I planned in ahead to make it longer. I thought it would be about a 10-minute presentation.
Well, it's been almost 45 minutes.
I know you said it. Thank you.
Yeah.
I can either stop or I can finish with the little bit of showing the idea of this was the amazement of how in the 8th house year, as by that chart, how it really was always a door shutting and a door opening.
Well, you've kind of demonstrated it already. I mean, already, I must
You
say,
told me I will
several
stop.
times.
If you're in charge, I'll stop.
You know, I mean, that is very, that's
Even though,
very
ladies,
interesting.
even though it's very difficult to order when the discussion is very improvised, and I want to allow for the flexibility to see where things get us. But because from the start we said this is roughly the plan, we've got that many presentations.
No, let's go for it.
I think now it's time, regardless of where we are. I know sometimes things need to be cut here and there, so that we stick to what we decided to do in the beginning. Because at the end of the day, Dwayne has also prepared, and I'm sure he's prepared a lot. So let's give him a chance, and then we can continue speaking next week about the examples. I mean, we're always together, so we can always continue. But I would really hate if we don't.
I mean, we have to let go. I mean, you know, I think last time, whatever, you know, I had prepared a much longer thing, but I had to let go because there were other people. And that's fine. You know, I think that's how it is. We have to share.
Yes. Well, this makes me mention something that I was going to propose to you to do. I just quickly think about if you guys want to present something. If you want to do a little lecture like today, Emo did a great job with this. We can designate certain times when we do that. Yeah. And we can meet to listen to that person present a certain thing. But these discussions, they need to be a little bit more mixed if we are to make sense, isn't it? Unfortunately, not for the first time today, we see that we cannot satisfy all the requirements of everyone at the same time.
No.
So that's why I'm intervening now, and I would suggest let's very quick, like 2 minutes break, so Dwayne can open up his presentation, and we can start. Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you. See you in a minute.
Thank you.
I just want to add, it's funny that Lauren got the got the punishing hand because it was me and Kate trying to, okay, but look at this and this planet, and look at what these are doing, and adding these things.
We're more grown up than that, aren't we? There's no punishing here.
It was a house experience.
Of timing, you know, and thinking of others, really.
It's not that I don't think of others. I was in my experience of having just followed a little chart I had made. So it just took off in its own way. And people
I mean, Dwayne is, look at Dwayne.
You still tap into your psychic. If you wanted to, could you open that door?
What?
You mentioned about your psychic experiences when you were younger. I mean, that's amazing, you know, being able to tune in to the thoughts. Is that gone from you, or is that still something?
Oh no, it got developed. I worked with 4 years with Native Americans, and I am actually certified as a clairvoyant, clairaudient, and clairsentient.
I'm going to go for the moment so that we can.
So that it only continued, and I became a Pleiadian light worker and a Native American practitioner as a medicine woman. So
yeah, because I'm very fascinated in that topic because it got covered briefly, activation stuff, and certain patterns seem to appear with people with that ability, clairvoyance, or kind of being able to.
I shut it down when it was very scary at a certain point, but then with all the ceremony that I did with the Native Americans, I opened that back up.
And I'm glad you've been. I guess it feeds back to what Madeleine was saying about being able to mature into that as well, I suppose. You know, I guess as a young person, or a younger person, it must have been a really traumatic experience for you.
Well, also my parents would tell me, "You're dreaming, you're asleep," and I wasn't asleep. So it was like nobody in the family unit was able to embrace it or encourage it. And it wasn't until in my 20s I met a mentor.
Very interesting, because sometimes when they talk about kind of spiritual work in that clairvoyancy, it's usually hereditary. So there's usually someone in the gene chain who has those specific set of skill sets, which are then, you know, it's what shamanism was about. Usually it's the shaman was like maybe an elder, and then someone further down the family tree would inherit those kind of shamanistic, and it's the role of the elder to teach, because a lot of times I watched this documentary where it's a little bit off topic, but where people who are diagnosed with supposed schizophrenia as a child or mental disturbances are actually just have innate shamanistic abilities and just can't express that or haven't been.
That's what they were checking for, and that's why they put all those whatever they put on your brain. They wanted to check out if I was epileptic or schizophrenic or whatever. What was all that? My parents wanted a scientific explanation for.
Could I please interrupt?
Yes.
I believe that there's an agreement.
Please go ahead. Please go ahead. Dwayne.
Thank you. I come out of each week here with an assignment to do research. That's where I'm relating to this group. The Radlina Shanova School of Astrology. And I love it. And last week it was to introduce myself to Profections, which I have never done in my 50 years of study. So it was quite an interesting research vector for me. The first place I came to was this website at astroseek.com, which conveniently calculates your current perfections and so on. The perfection technique is called a circumambulation, meaning a walk around the chart. Yes, the spiral. I love spirals and I love applying them and experiencing.
Yeah.
A great chart that's available there at kellysastrology.com.
Mm-hmm.
So only goes to 71, and there I am in the 71st year or 72nd year. Expect 12th house issues to dominate from February 3rd, 2020 to February 3rd, 2021. Well, as that's, the 12th house is often associated with keywords like, it's the house of mystery. And that was a little retreat spot that I go to periodically in the high alpine. And that was my birthday. So that was the day that photo of this one here. That's where I was on my 71st birthday.
Wow.
I've annually gone on a ski trip solo. And so from that, the world was changing by then already with the COVID-19, but so much has happened since. And it's definitely been a 12th house encounter for me. So my natal chart, 12th house, the house of mystery. And a quote from Rudyard, "It is indeed a house of mystery, for all transitional stages are filled with mysterious and unknowable or irrational elements. They should be met armed with a clear understanding of the entire sequence of past experiences, with courage and with faith, as well as with compassion. Such meetings are promises of immortality." The 12th house, it's one that, it's deep. So looking to my own chart, as I'm understanding, I'm learning this technique as I'm going. As I understand it, Mercury is what they call the time lord of my 12th house. So that then implicates Mercury, which natally is in the 7th house. That Mercury is in, trine to my moon? No, sextile to the moon. Opposites my Pluto Ceres conjunction in the 1st house. And I'm looking also then down to Neptune with the trine. So I'm getting a sense of the pattern at play, let's say, or the patterns at play during this 12th house passage. focusing in then on Uranus in the 12th house, natal Uranus in the 12th, which has then a trine to my 8th house Mars in Aquarius. Opposite that Sagittarian 6th house Eros galactic center, which I think came up last week in my presentation, and trine to the South Node. So I'm getting a sense of this, these patterns that I'm to be aware of during this 72nd year, which I'm nearing the end of. But these have all been, in retrospect, definitely in play, and continue to this day. I'm associating those patterns with my direct experience. So in the 12th house, what is to be met has its source in collective issues, in national or social fate, in the pressures of society upon the individual, and of the collective unconscious upon the conscious ego. National fate. Some more keywords commonly associated with the 12th house. And looky. I, like the rest of us, have had to stare this new phenomenon in the face and deal with it and all that comes with it. And doesn't a lot come with it? I live in British Columbia. We're under mandatory masks wherever you go. Social gatherings are limited in number. And this just goes on week after week. Our Prime Minister of Canada, September 29th, 2020, he releases a video where he tells the UN conference at that time that the pandemic provides an opportunity for a reset. And you're going to hear a lot more about the Great Reset. And it emanates from pretty much a lot of it from this fellow here, right here, Klaus Schwab. And he recently released the book, COVID-19, The Great Reset. Some leaders and decision makers who were already at the forefront of the fight against climate change may want to take advantage of the shock inflicted by the pandemic to implement long-lasting and wider environmental changes. They will, in effect, make good use of the pandemic by not letting the crisis go to waste. Well, isn't that something to ponder? Great Reset. We have the World Economic Forum in the picture. We got the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and a whole lot more going on. New technologies and approaches are merging the physical, digital, and biological worlds in ways that will fundamentally transform humankind. The extent to which that transformation is positive will depend on how we navigate the risks and opportunities that arise along the way. Globalist Klaus Schwab made it clear that transhumanism is an integral part of the Great Reset when he said that the fourth industrial revolution would lead to a fusion of our physical, digital, and biological identity, which in his book he clarifies is implantable microchips that can read your thoughts. So this is the kind of scenario that many people are pursuing. I'm not one of them. And here he is talking with our Prime Minister. If no one power can enforce order, our world will suffer from a global order deficit. Unless individual nations and international organizations succeed in finding solutions to better collaborate at the global level, we risk entering an age of entropy in which retrenchment, fragmentation, anger, and parochialism will increasingly define our global landscape, making it less intelligible and more disorderly. In other words, there's no room for the spontaneously arising social order that occurs when people are allowed to freely interact. Instead, there must be one power to enforce whatever the desired social, environmental, economic, geopolitical order is. It's kind of like Lord of the Rings, one power or one ring to rule them all. That's what these folks are going for. This are excerpts from the Biderman report. So, I assume that everyone on board here is having to deal with mask mandates. A lot of us are some people are compelled to stay in their homes even, or to not gather in groups. I mean, this is what's going on right now on the planet. And it's very, very vital that people wake up, as far as I'm concerned, because it's coming on at an incredible rate. And it's been dealing with this 12th house, the technique that's brought me even deeper into my understanding of what's coming on. Inequality will separate, this is another Klaus Schwab quote, inequality will separate those who adapt from those who resist. The material winners and losers in all senses of the words. The winners may even benefit from some form of radical human improvement generated by certain segments of the fourth industrial revolution, such as genetic engineering, from which the losers will be deprived. This risks creating class conflicts and other clashes unlike anything we have ever seen before.
Dwayne?
Yes.
Would it be right to say that in fact this is really the shadow side of what if we are thinking that we get coming into the Aquarian age, and
Absolutely, yeah,
it is really that's why maybe it's very, very relevant, because maybe we try to hide that from ourselves, all this really the depth of it. I don't know, that's what I kind of perceive as you show this. I'm suddenly overwhelmed by the shadow feeling of it.
We do need to address the shadow, and
we need to, that's right, we need to be very aware of it. Yeah.
Thank you. So notes to self. I intend to inform myself even more of what's coming down, and there's lots out there. Mm-hmm. People are throughout the planet are addressing this issue.
Yeah.
One of the best resources I've come across is on this website, dissidencesignposts.org. These are very concise presentations loaded with linked resources that will give you like the big picture, certainly, and also invoke the well, they're here to alarm, but also to inform. I mean, let's go with facts, not fear. The mainstream media is looking after the fear factor, but we've got to educate ourselves aside from what comes at us as propaganda. if you're not familiar with Agenda 2030, great time to start learning about it. There's more going on than meets the slick graphics. And there we go.
Well, Dwayne, considering I'm still in my 20s, this scares the shit out of me, but I love it because I know we need to wake the fuck up. And it's amazing because there's so many people that I would never even think would consider anti-vaxxing. And now they're like, hold on a fucking second, what is going on? Like, all of it is becoming woke. People are waking up. And it's incredible because it's the people that I least expect that are just like turning the other way and saying, no way, I'm not blind anymore. So thank you for showing the dark side, because that really makes me shake considering my future, but it's necessary. As you said, Simona, we need to see the dark side. We need to see the shadow.
Absolutely.
Right.
You know, I mean, I've got my ex-husband, who is at the moment, he's 83, so he's going through his Uranus return, and he's actually very ill. He's got a life-threatening disease, and he's in bed, bedridden. And I keep telling him, you know, on the 21st of December, we'll finally move into the Aquarian age. Yeah. And he's lying there with his beanie over his eyes. This is a guy who's been a really good healer all through his life. And, you know, I remember we used to sing, you know, Aquarius, you know, when the sun comes in, right?
I love that song.
Yeah, in the 60s, you know, this is me.
It's remixed.
You know,
it's remixed into so much music today, honestly. All the new age music
and
has that quote in it.
He tells me, but where is it? Look at what's happening. And so he's starting to tell me about, you know, Kennedy's death. Kennedy was shot. Martin Luther King was shot. All the goodies were shot. Yeah, that's the shadow side. And what you know, and what you're presenting, Dwayne, is the shadow side. And this is what your generation are going to be, you know, you are going to be dealing with this. And, you know, it's, yeah, I don't know how to express it, but yeah, thank you, Dwayne. Yeah.
Dwayne, I have a question for you. You said you've been doing many years experience, obviously, with astrology. How do you see this turning? Do you see positives coming as of next year? Do you see years and years before we really work? Like, just your interpretation, because I know everyone has so many, but I'm just curious about yours.
Well, I don't have a predictive orientation to it, but I do have an intentional orientation. And I have, as I shared last week, there's in 2021, there are 3 days when Saturn and Uranus come to exact last quarter.
Yeah.
And I anticipate that this to be a moment of a great turning. I mean, there's a crisis in consciousness throughout the planet, and there are turning points in that crisis, and we're coming up to one. And I'm intending to, I have a website, AquariusArise.net, which is a thread of a start. Like, I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm pulling on this thread, and it says, you know, keep developing. People will associate, and you know, it'll happen. But it's a hopeful view of the future of what's possible. It images forth, you know, like I had earlier in the presentation, you know, love. I mean, those of us that are waking up have to bring ourselves forward and you know, as warriors of the light, and bring, and you know, my generation, you know, the Beatles were so huge.
Yeah. I love the Beatles photo, by the way. It was my favorite band ever. So that was love.
You know, just yeah, make love, not war.
Yeah,
that's right.
Because I'm entering my Saturn return during all of this. My Saturn return, the peak of it is in February, just of course after all of this amazing shift. So,
are you an Aquarian as well?
I'm a Taurus Sun, Gemini rising, but with an Aquarius moon conjunct Saturn.
Okay. Well, I noticed something. I don't know if you guys would agree with me that people with more of a, let's say, strong Uranus in the chart, things falling in Aquarius, they're more, more likely to interpret the situation, the global situation, in one way. I consider myself part of that group. But we should also be mindful that other people are maybe just not able to perceive it in another way, in the same way, because they have different energies in their chart. They have their own different circumstances, fears, and so on and so forth, which is very complicated. I'm not agreeing or disagreeing with anything that was presented, but I want to remind you about something else. Neptune in Pisces. And even though my inclination is to also look at the dark side, and my Pluto is and to investigate and to doubt everything I'm being told and everything that's being put out on both sides of the argument. At the same time, I keep reminding myself, we're still in Neptune in Pisces. Things are not clear. Nobody really knows. And be aware who plays with your sentiments, with your energies in the chart. Even if you're Uranian. Uranians are meant to be independent thinkers. In most cases, they are. But at the same time, there are people out there trained to feed in information to independent thinkers as well, so that the conflict is kind of continued. My personal strategy is observe, think about it, don't jump into anything, don't jump into any activism or anything like this, not yet. Maybe there'll come a time when that will be necessary. But in this murky Neptunian atmosphere, where nobody knows what's really happening and which information is to be trusted, I think we should read a lot, we should think a lot and discuss a lot, but we should refrain from extremities and looking for balance. And my strategy is balance at the moment and concentration on my own work. So that
in terms of perfection, though, in general, you could say, like, yes, that's what's happening, but of course, everyone here has different perfected years. So,
yes,
and we're all being affected by the circumstances.
Yours, Kate, what is your perfected year right now?
Same as Enno's, the first year.
First house.
First house, yeah. So, but I think in terms of 12th house, you could see it as like because loss. 12th house is about loss.
Yeah.
Just mind. So yes, you've lost your freedom to a certain degree. You're having to, your Uranus in the 12th house, so it's about, is activating that. So going deeper into subconscious mind, looking for patterns, looking for, you could say it's like radical thinking, because Uranus is radical. So a deep interest in those kind of distant sites, one could say, is alternative / radical / independent of mind. So that's how you could interpret a perfected year in that way, like, because this is all happening to us. But like Radina said, not everyone is invested in looking at alternative theories, etc., etc. It might be that for you personally, that has been activated because of Uranus in the 12th, which is to do with the unconscious, subconscious mind. But there's a lot of intricacies to the 12th house. It's one of those unknowns. In traditional astrology, it was known as, like, if you have anything in the 12th house, they were like, well, sucks to be you, effectively. And same as the 6th house. But like with the 12th house, it can indicate loss. And with Uranus, that could indicate sudden loss, change.
Something that maybe naturally needs to be released. There is no good and bad in astrology. That's my philosophy. There are no bad houses. Everything has meaning within the bigger context. If Neptune takes away something, or the 12th house takes away something, we know for sure that was meant to go, that was not needed. With the transpersonal planets, we just don't want to let go ourselves. They attack through outside, like seemingly outside events, so that we are forced to do the changes and the realizations that we have to do anyway in our journey. See, that's a very big topic. Let's not go there now, because we really are very much over time. Very thankful for all of your contributions today. Dwayne, Lauren, you also, Kate, you have great, and mostly Emo. Thank you so much. You did a great presentation. I learned a lot from you today. It's, I'm sorry I forgot your name. Could you tell me again?
Me?
Yes.
B. Oh, sorry. Yeah, it's Brooke. Sorry. Next time I'll log in with my
I
proper
remember
name.
you, Brooke. Would you come again next time if we? I don't know.
Yes. When are they? How often are these?
Every week. We do it every week on Thursday at the same time.
Thank you so much, everyone. This has been really amazing. I found a little tribe that I need to swim around and then suck out your knowledge and ask questions. So thank you so much. All of you have put so much amazing things in my mind.
Nice to have you.
Last question. Shall I decide what we're doing next week and just post about it? Or do you have any concrete ideas you want to share quickly in 2 minutes about the next topic?
What are we going to do for next week?
That's what I'm asking.
Oh, sorry.
What about the age of Aquarius?
Always such big global topics. No, I like it, but okay.
Are they fun?
It's very speculative. We already started with Wayne to go towards the age of Aquarius, I think, today. So yeah, that's a possibility. Who else votes for that? Do you like it, guys?
What would we, and how can we individually explore it? Any ideas about that?
Like everyone could just
go ahead.
Okay, I was thinking, we all have something that I would personally like to, what's the word? Like clarify the archetype of Aquarius. And also just talk about the fact that we're in an age of Pisces, which is something that we lose sight of a little bit. Anyway, that's just me.
We have to talk about the general idea about the ages, how, the timing and things like that, explain that, because at the end of the day, we're doing these discussions not just to have fun together here and to have company with each other. We're also posting that for other people to watch. So that's why in the beginning, we do a bit of theory and then we continue with the examples. So yeah, you do whatever you want. Not everything can be turned personal, very, very personal. This is maybe the most not personal topic, but it's we are all part of the big context. And it's good to think about whether are you more Uranian or are you more Saturnian? Are you more something else? Like, for example, just very quickly, I'm thinking that would be an accident to Aquarius. I have so much Scorpio in my chart. So that means a clash of some sort. But also there are other things in the chart that point towards ways of using that opportunity to integrate into the new reality, which is inevitably going to be more Aquarian with its good and bad. We had a discussion in the past. We had a discussion.
I'm sorry, I wanted to ask if there's a date that you look at for the age of Aquarius beginning. I mean, people
we all know this is speculative.
The 12th of December.
No, that's something completely different.
No, but there you go. So
has to do with the conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn. Well, you can think 17. Of it like another sign in that direction, but
it's more. Isn't it when I'm probably not good with dates, but isn't it when the zero Aquarius?
No. That's
no, not that either. Okay.
No, okay. Well, it will be a chance if we choose that topic for next week. It will be a chance to explore it, to clarify it, and so on. I really would like to make you aware that time. We have been here for almost 4 hours now, so let's make it more concise. I know it's been very interesting today.
We like it, Radivina. We enjoy it.
Life goes on. Somebody waits for me to finish, and I'm sure other people wait for you to finish as well. So, and Emo has an important meeting this evening. On the
yes. Good luck, by the way. Just that's the first thing I want to say.
That Venus is on our descendant today. That I didn't know. I hadn't noticed that. So we have Venus on the descendant. Let's make use of it. And go out for dinner or something.
It's the first night of Hanukkah in the Jewish calendar, which I'm having a celebration with my best friend here.
Great.
Nice.
Are we doing the age of Aquarius next week?
Yes.
Good, agreed. Okay, see you then.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye.
Great.
Thank you.
Bye.